Good evening, everybody, and welcome. It's round number 3 of this year's ASR Supercars Championship, and it's the first trip across the ditch for the season. This is the first stop, both on the North Island. The Hamilton 200, a circuit we last ran 2 years ago, 2020. It was also a 200-kilometre event and the site of the first ever race win in ASR Supercars for the defending series champion. And he's going to have his work cut out for him tonight because he's missed the last round and he's on the back foot in the point standings and needs a very, very good showing to get back into contention. Steve DeVries here in the commentary box, and Benjamin Rhodey Rhodes right alongside me for this one. Rhodey, it's a pivotal moment in the championship. Early goings, but very, very important for a lot of drivers. Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, you're right. Now that we've crossed the ditch, a few championship positions up for play here. As you mentioned, Luke Rosella, who took his first win here 2 years ago. Coming back after a round off, and championship leader at the moment also on a round off, Mcfarlane, so this will become his drop round. So, but as the championship plays at the moment, he's going to drop way back. But still plenty to play for very early in the season, and it's our first 200k enduro, which means our first top 10 shootout as well.
That's precisely right. We've got a top 10 shootout to follow the qualifying session this evening. And of course, we'll take the fastest top 10. They will go out in reverse order of the top 10, so 10 right through to 1. Could shake up the top end of the championship running order, especially for the grid positions to go along with it as well. And most of the occasions that we've had a top 10 shootout, there's been one or two people in that top 10 that tend to outperform themselves compared to what they do in the qualifying session. So we're going to keep an interesting eye out to see who the improvers are and who actually doesn't manage to improve by as much on the times they set in qualifying. Qualifying at 10 minutes, shootout, of course, you only get the one lap to do the business. So if you butcher it, you haven't got a second chance. That's it, over and done, and you'll be starting as far down the order as, well, potentially 10th if you're the first man out. You're going to be the one that starts toward the back of the grid. But if there's a few people that decide they want to butcher the curbs tonight, then they'll probably be starting a bit further down that top 10 order and even a bit further down the grid as well. With the driver's briefing not too far away from finishing up and getting underway, we're going to keep rolling through things pretty quickly tonight because it is going to be a fairly long night for everybody that's racing here, given the race is going to go for about 80 minutes or so at least, and it's going to be a bit of a fairly long night for everybody in the live chat as well. Good evening to Glenn Miles and Zach Brown, who are in there watching along this evening. Let's keep going along. Let's have a look at our track. As we said, it's the first of 2 trips across the ditch this year. To the North Island we go, and into the city suburbs of Auckland here in New Zealand. Rhodey, 3.4 kilometres, plenty of bumps, curbs, walls, everything you can throw a stick at for a street circuit, and plenty of mistakes I can think we can say are going to happen tonight.
100%. This is, if you build a checklist of what makes a street circuit, you're going to be able to tick everything off around Hamilton. It's a really tricky little place. It pinches from Gold Coast. I mentioned earlier before we started streaming that this is the Gold Coast of the New Zealand islands, and it's probably pretty accurate. Now, it's a lot of places that you can get it right, a lot of places you can get it wrong. And as we saw, I think it was 2 years ago when we were running it, we saw some cars get it very wrong through the back chicane. That area has since been tweaked a little bit, but it's by no means an easy pass through there. And especially in the shootout, it's going to be big risk for people on whether they roll for a track cut or not.
Yeah, there's been a bit of tidy-up work, I think we can probably call it, at the back chicane. There was a few of the old launching curbs that were hidden behind the chicane that were throwing people up in the air. They've since been found out what the cause of those was and removed. There's been some track limit overhauls at that part of the circuit as well. So there is a little bit of, I guess, new learnings for people this year. To get the line right through the chicane. There has been some improvements to the profiling on the curbs as well. So a few people have been able to find the limits pretty quickly. A few people have taken a bit longer than usual to adapt to all those changes. Of course, the circuit itself has had a bit of a going over, the new signage. There's been a full track limits rework as well. So a a fair change from 2 years ago. It's not been a regular occurrence on the calendar, but it's a regular challenge, I think we call it here in ASR, Roadie, because we're throwing all sorts of different things at the drivers this year in the Supercars Championship. We've got 3 different formats, and it's the 3rd different format in as many rounds this time.
Exactly. We're keeping the drivers on their toes this season. We're not really letting them get comfortable in any formats. And, it's something different. And it really it brings a different style of driver out, one that can adapt quickly, one that, doesn't need to sit on a certain format or a certain, race type or even car setup, especially with some of the variants and tracks that we've been going to, from, a Grand Prix style circuit to a very short circuit to a very typically street circuit. We're also keeping the guys do the setups on their toes as well. And no, it's providing some really good varying results, which is great for us in the broadcast. And it's also obviously great for the guys on track, because you're seeing some guys in positions that we don't maybe aren't quite used to seeing them in.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. And having a bit of a look at the current practice time standings with everybody in the briefing at the moment, of course, there's no on-track activity. There is a bit of a mix up the top there at the moment. So the usual suspects are up the top. So Rosella, Redmond, Devenish, Stenberg, they're all in the top 10. Some interesting names up there at the moment. Lachlan Burke with the 3rd quickest time. Now, that's going on from the last bit of form that he showed, really throwing down the gauntlet to Brenton Foley in the last round at Symmons Plains. Remember that last sort of lap half attempt to try and get past him for the win, and all 3 races at Symmons Plains decided by about a 10th of a second. That's how close all of them were. Braxton Stancliffe up there in 5th place. His father's going to be really proud tonight. He's at an event, and I think they're live streaming it in there. So g'day to Scott Stancliffe and everybody over there at that event. Hopefully your young fella puts on a fairly good show for you this weekend. And Ben Hall, Hans Brunswick, Dane Liccardo, they're all up there in the top 10 positions or thereabouts as well. So I think there's going to be a bit of a mix in the top 10 for the shootout coming up very shortly, Rody.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you mentioned definitely some familiar sights in that top 10. But yeah, I know a couple of guys that I've talked to in the past week or two who obviously we announced at the start of the season this was going to involve a shootout, but having had it reminded to them, they've gone, "Ooh, I'd like to be in a shootout. I'd like to have a little bit of airtime." And as we mentioned, that could go either way. Either they do a really good lap, or they fluff it, or they do a Locky Burke as an example, I think, in the Enduro Cup last year, and really fluff it. But either way, it's a little bit of airtime, and I know a lot of drivers really, really like the idea of having their own little moment in the spotlight. So there are a few drivers on that list who might be pushing a little harder than they otherwise would, because of the opportunity to be in that top 10 shootout. That said, Tim Redmond, I mean, he's been quick in more or less everything we throw him into, but this is still pretty good for him. But again, home track advantage plays into this. Same with Braxton Stancliffe. He's doing quite well as well, up in the top 5. But obviously, I'd say home track advantage playing a little bit there as well. But it's interesting that it doesn't necessarily lean to home track advantage, because I think the next Kiwi down from them, if we include the non-Kiwi is Nathan Higginson down in 15th.
Yeah, so he's one of the honorary Kiwis. I think that we're calling it this year. I think, well, that's what he's calling it anyway. So he's down 15th. Then you've got NZ Snipes, Peter Thrower there, and Cheese. They're the ones a bit further down the order. But the Kiwis looking to put on a good show this week, I think. Home track advantage, 2 of home races for them this year. And whenever we roll them out, definitely keen to be putting on a good show. And looks like we're about to head over to qualifying. So, of course, qualifying 10 minutes is all you get in qualifying in Supercars this year, which is more than enough time at a lot of these shorter circuits to get in the laps that you need. The only real exception so far this year has been Albert Park, with the length of that circuit and the time that goes with it being around the 1 minute 50 mark. All the other circuits are sort of about 1 minute 30 or less. There really isn't too much difference between how many laps you can get in. Normally about 5 to 7 laps around a lot of the circuits this year is what you're going to get. So some drivers will probably opt to break the qualifying session up into a half tonight, try and get 2 or 3 fast flying laps in, get a new set of boots on, get going again, and try and get another 2 or 3 laps in. Or some drivers might opt to just maybe sit part of it out and maybe go out in a bit of a lull period when the track is quite clear. But I don't know, Rhodey, what sort of strategy do you think you'd be looking at in this 10-minute quali session? You know, splitting it down the middle, maybe only doing the one session, looking for a bit of a gap to go into. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I can defer back to what happened with the Dev Series guys last week, and it's really weird saying last week because I swear it was more than a week ago. But I think we ended up accidentally, but somewhat purposely at the same time. I think we ended up with all the cars on track and most of them in one sector, which is not ideal. It's not a long track, but there's still going to be enough room for most cars to be on track at the same time and have workable space. That said, some drivers do work differently. Some drivers like to have a gap in front of them relative to the cars around them. I know personally, I've been relatively off the pace, so I like to have someone to follow. But in terms of strategy for qualifying, I think maybe splitting it in half would be the best practice. Just again because you don't want to get into the rhythm of, say, picking up a track cut through the fast chicane and then getting that into your brain and doing that over and over, because that just gets you more and more angry. So I think a break gives you a chance to reset, refocus your mind, take a bit of fuel out as well. By all means, go and set a banker lap and go for a fast lap now, but I don't think it would hurt to have a little bit in reserve to have a crack at the end of the last 5 minutes.
No, definitely not. And you can see just from a static camera, just at turn one, keeping an eye on the field, heading out of the lane, there are quite a number of drivers taking the opportunity to go out at the very beginning of the session. There's about half a dozen drivers still laid up in the lane as we speak. Actually, now it's about 5 drivers. The first man that's out on a lap at the moment is actually Daniel Cox. So he's at the head of the queue. Ben Hall behind him. They were waiting at pit lane exit. As soon as the session went green, they were out. Everybody else was a little bit slow away, but they are still making their way out. And it looks like everybody with the exception of Lachlan Lock is going to be out on track. Now, Lachlan Lock actually did receive, I think, a penalty from the last round for his entry, so he's going to be a rear of grid start for this one. As we go on board with the Hellenberger cam for Daniel Cox, into turn one we go. Tricky braking, curb on the inside. Try and get close to that wall on the outside, as close as you dare. You don't want to hit it too hard. Just flick the headlights on as well. There's a little bit of traffic that's just exited the lane. One of the Warwick Racing Team cars and Hans Brunswick. I think that's Steve Warwick there as well. Into turn two. Now down the short chute into this tricky section. It's a really nasty bump there on the approach to 3 and 4, just right on the racing line as well, and it sort of upsets your braking. Now here comes the real challenge. 5, 6 and 7 curbs. 1, 2, 3. That's a pretty tidy line. Got a little bit squirrely on the exit, tried to apply the power, and the car disagreed with him. Into turn 8. Use the curb as much as you dare on the outside. It can upset the car if you get the line wrong. Run down towards turn 9. Don't worry about the white line, it's permitted. Through ITM corner, not using all the runoff road there either. And now this sequence of almost like a staircase here at Adelaide. A couple of really quick 90-degree bends, a couple of sort of just 45-degree kinks in there. Into the last corner. You can pick up the throttle quite early on the exit of that corner because you really need it. It's a really short run up this straight. And across the line we go. 1:23.758 is the opening benchmark time as he pinches a brake going into 1. And I'm sure the times will improve from there. Ben Hall immediately behind received a track violation on that first flying lap. So already one driver falling foul of the limits.
Yeah, going through after Coxie there. Dan Licata was next through up to with a 1:21.75. Starting to pile in now though. Locky Burke was at the top, then Will Devenish, Kurt Stenberg, and Luke Rosella's just come through as well. Already 8 cars through, and Luke Rosella top of the pile with a 1:19.64,
yeah,
which is not bad at all. He's nearly 4 tenths up on Kurt Stenberg, who's then nearly a second clear of Locky Burke. But as we mentioned, first lap's in. I believe Luke's going again. Kurt's just pulled over to let Luke through. Yeah, pretty good times already coming in very early in the session.
Very early improvement as well. A very good marker from Brendan Ross, just under a 1:21 there for Karcher before he's given the wall a bit of a rub on the exit of turn 1 as well. A handful of times in, 15 times, 15 times now out of the 23 runners. There's a few drivers that have burnt their bridges a few too many times already and have gone back to the lane for a fresh set of tyres. Doing the math a little bit earlier, thanks to Daniel Cox, he was suggesting that 7 laps would probably be the maximum amount of laps you could get in if you really wanted to stay out there on the track. But I think a few drivers will probably just go out with the mentality of get 2 or 3 laps in and just see where they sit before they get another set of tyres on and go for another lap or two. Here's Joe Mugford, one of the debutants this year, car 69, the TriStar Racing entry, and his run to the line up and over the hump. And at the moment he was on a 122, he now goes to a 121.7. Very, very nice improvement, 8.5 tenths improvement for him. And he pulls over at turn 1 to go back to the pits. Who's yet to set a time here? Lewis Wedding in 21st place. Looks like he's coming around the final sequence of corners now. Here he is. So this will put a time on the board for him. Also Nathan Higginson and Locky, like we said before, is going to be starting off the rear. Higo with a couple of track cuts already on this occasion. Wedding goes to 8th. So at the moment, both the cars from Pixel Sim Sports in the 10. That's not a bad result for those guys at all. They'll actually be pretty pleased with that, considering where they were a bit earlier in the week, Roddy.
Yeah, I can recall a few times earlier this week Lewis rubbishing his thoughts of how well they do around here. I think at one point he was considering sitting this one out. So 8th so far, obviously still 4 minutes left to go on the session. That's not bad, and sitting, I think he is still P4 at this point in time. Brendan Ross, started the season, and I will keep reminding him of this, is marking himself as the second worst driver in the series. 4th in qualifying, not a bad result for the second worst driver.
Definitely not a bad result as well. And there was a car in the fence back there. I think it might have been the Steve Warwick car. Yeah, it is in the fence at turn 3. Just saw as Locky Burke went flashing past, who's repositioned himself in position 3, which was the location he was at the conclusion of practice. So he's definitely backing up his pace from Simmons Plains and also from practice as well. So considering he's got a bad back, we were talking to him a little bit earlier, it feels like he's twinged a muscle or two in one of his in his lower back, or that at school this week, and doesn't feel like he should be racing, but he's showing no signs of that ailment right now, and he's actually a quarter second up, second sector split as well. So this will keep him in 3rd place. It'll edge him further away from Brendan Ross. It won't really make a massive gain on Stenberg's 120.0, but if he keeps this going, it will definitely put him into a mid 1 minute 20, and it does. Actually found some more time too, found nearly another 2 tenths, goes to a 1 minute 20.495. Very nice job for Locky Burke, and he will be safe in the shootout.
Yeah, that was a good lap, and you're right, that'll just bank him in. Should keep him pretty well in position from where he's sitting. That said, we've saw some quick times out of some guys that aren't quite up there yet. Ken Redmond currently sitting P5. He's out there on, I believe, an out lap. Will Devenish down in P7 as well. He was in the top 5 in practice. So it's a case of, that said, there are some drivers that I imagine are treating this almost like a Q2 and F1, where those who know they're quick enough maybe aren't pulling out all the stops so they don't reveal their hand too early, versus those drivers who are on the cut line and driving their absolute darndest already just to get into the shootout. So we might see some guys potentially not... shootout position is important. We might see some guys, though, as I mentioned, keep a little bit in reserve for the shootout just so they don't give away their cars too early. Yeah,
I think you're right. A few people have probably just realised that they can make the shootout. They don't need to do anything too fancy. As long as they are in the top 10, they'll be safe. This man's on the cusp. Nathan Higginson. He's just left the lane. He's 2 tenths of a second behind Dane Liccardo. So this last spot in the 10 is going to intensify this. A couple of drivers that are in that cut zone at the moment. Will Devenish just coming to the line now. He was a little bit up on his time this lap, and he goes to P4. Ooh. So that's a really good, solid improvement for him. That means that should be safely into the shootout. I think probably from this man back, Rhodey, Corey Mcfarlane, who's in 7th, just had a bit of a slide off of turn 4 and coming up to the chicane here. He's on a 1 minute 21.093. Behind him You got Braxton, Stancliffe, 1 minute 21.1. Lewis Wedding, 1 minute 21.1. He's on the road behind Braxton. And then you've got Hans Brunswick, who's in position 10, 1 minute 21.2. Dane Liccardo, 1 minute 21.3. Nathan Higginson, 1 minute 21.5. And Joe Mugford, 1 minute 21.7. I think these guys are the real ones that you've got to keep an eye out for here in this last 30 seconds or so, because they're the ones that are probably going to change positions over the course of the next 30 seconds if they get it right.
Yeah, there's a few other drivers that's in the top 10 that maybe aren't quite performing so well in qualifying, and it's just the shorter format maybe not working so well for them. But you're right, I reckon that's the cutoff point. Yeah, some drivers that in that list that weren't in the top 10 in practice that aren't there now. Mugford was back in the top 10, so he's probably got a little bit more to potentially pull, although it depends on how much he's still got left in the tank.
Well, Mugford's not going to get another lap here, Rody.
It's
his last, and he found an improvement, but it wasn't enough. So that's him done and dusted. The next man we're looking for is Nathan Higginson. He's at turn 8 at the moment, so he's got about a third of a lap to go to get into the shootout. Now, he's found a little bit of time, but that's not going to be enough. That's definitely not going to be enough. Only 23 thousandths of a second. There's nothing in that at all. And I think, yeah, he's bailing. I think that's a bail from Higo. And he is going to be just probably trying to complete this lap here. I think he's going to come into the lane.
Yeah, he's even that one up. So I think the next one in the queue
is Liccardo. And Liccardo's was down by 1.4 seconds. So this is not going well, or according to plan, for a number of drivers that wanted to make the shootout this time around. And it's Liccardo's, Liccardo and Mcfarlane. Mcfarlane arrived with a shit ton of speed there. And, did he get?
He did get I think he snagged the wall there, yeah. And it's not quite a Hamilton 2008. I can't remember which one it was. It was the wet race. Not quite that, but it was something similar to that. Yeah, I think he's snagged the wall on the way through there. And I will catch you for your non-stream friendly word there at one point, Nether. But
yes.
I'm not sure what that was. But yeah, you're right. A couple of guys out of position from where I think they want to be. Dane, one of them, he was running back in the top 10, but he was running pretty comfortably. Mugford as well. A couple of guys we did miss in that sort of reshuffle as well. I believe Hans did make a small improvement. He's up to 8th. They've actually ended up shuffling Braxton back to 9th, but Braxton does stay in the top 10. And both Pixel Sim Sports cars in the top 10. I think they're the only 2-car team in the top 10.
Yeah, you're spot on there. Actually, the other one will be the 2 AAR cars of actually all 3 of the AAR Mustangs made the 10 as well. But of course, 2 of them are in a team. I think it's Mcfarlane and Brunswick have actually put themselves together this time around. Locky, Burke, the satellite entry. So all 3 of the AAR Mustangs made the 10. The Pixel Sim Sport cars made the 10. So too did Rosella and Stenberg and Devenish. They were the 3 protagonists that are sort of up the pointy end of the field. Tim Redmond made that entry list in his Pack and Save Mustang as well. And then, as you mentioned, Hans Brunswick was the 3rd of the AAR cars, and Braxton Stancliffe, the other one in the 10. So the order of the top 10 is Luke Rosella, Kurt Stenberg, Locky Burke, Will Devenish, Brendan Ross, Tim Redmond, Corey Mcfarlane, Hans Brunswick, Braxton Stancliffe, and Lewis Wedding. That is the top 10, and they will, of course, go out in reverse order. Liccardo missed out on the top 10 by 0.2 of a second. So that's how close that one was. And between positions 9 and 10, Braxton Stancliffe and Lewis Wedding, 4 1,000ths of a second.
Oh, yeah, that was tight between. I don't think Braxton wasn't the threat dropping out of the top 10 in the end there. It was just a case of how far he would drop. And you're right, 4 1,000ths, he could have been in the back end of the top 10. He still gets to go then and have a run. As I mentioned, a few drivers maybe holding a bit in reserve, a few drivers potentially not getting the lap in that they wanted to get in. Even with, the opportunity to space yourself out on the track, you've still got traffic to deal with at some point. This one now, you've got no excuse. You have the track to yourself. You've got no excuse for, cars blocking you, cars just, putting you off your game, getting into your vision or anything like that, having to check your mirrors, someone dropping a smoke show or a tire or anything like that. There's none of that as you can use an excuse now. And as a racing driver, you love to have excuses because it means you're not at fault, but they're running out of them now. It's a shootout and it's all on them.
Yeah, it's all on them this time around. So this is going to be the piece of the puzzle that everybody's sort of going to, sort of think about. They need to psych themselves up. They need to make sure they don't make any mistakes whatsoever because it's all eyes on them. It's all eyes on them. So this will be it'll be the first shootout since Bathurst last year. So who's in this list that hasn't been in a shootout before? That's the bit that sort of gets me. I'm looking up and down the order, and I can't see anybody on this list for the top 10 that hasn't been involved in a shootout in some degree. Stenberg and Rosella were in it last year at Bathurst because they were paired up as a team. Tim Redmond, he's been in one before. So too's Rossi and Lewis Wedding. I think just about everybody on this list in the top 10's been in there. Maybe Corey Mcfarlane's the only one.
McFarlane, who's a debutant this year. But otherwise, no, I think you're right. I'm pretty sure Braxton did slip in during the Enduro Cup. Obviously, Lewis and Wilson Rossi last year in the Enduro Cup. I don't think we've got. Outside of Mcfarlane, I think it's already a very well-voted top 10. Although you're right, it's a stat that I should have added to my sheet of stuff to track. So come next top 10 shootout, I will have stats of who's been in a shootout and how many shootouts they've been in. No, you're right. As things sit, a very, very experienced top 10 group.
Yep, I agree. And there's a lot of change, I think, that can happen in this shootout as well. So just looking up and down this order, where is the change going to come from? I think maybe someone up the pointy end might make a mistake and slide back a little bit. I think maybe somebody down the bottom end might gain 1 or 2 spots. They're going to be the ones we're going to be keeping an eye out for over the course of the next, 20 odd minutes or so when we get going here. Now, I've actually just noticed that we're going to have to just do a bit of a reset here, and we're just trying to get a few people together for the shootout. Now, one of the drivers actually has just unfortunately left the game, which is one of our pet peeves here, is that he was actually, what we're going to name is Corey Mcfarlane. He needed to actually be in position to go out in a shootout here, and we can't get them back into the game when it rolls over to qualifying. So we need to get him back in, and then we can get going from there. While we actually have a bit of time here, Rhodey, and we're getting a couple of the guys in, let's have a look at the drivers' standings going into the third round tonight. There it is on the screen. I'll let you sum that one up there, but the one notable point that you mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, the points leader, Brenton Foley, is absent tonight, and the drop round, while it's not in effect at the moment, it will be later on in the year.
Yeah, so as things stand at this point of the season, he's going to drop a long way. I was doing the math in my head earlier. It relies on theoretically, the furthest he could drop is to, I believe it's 17th or 18th in the points. So that does imply that Steve Burke wins tonight, and then all the other drivers above him finish in a roundabout way to all pass Foley. I think the more realistic way to look at it is Foley's going to drop out of the top 10, given the amount of points on offer just in a single race. But Foley leads the title at this point. It's a Will Devenish in second. So assuming a good run for him, he's likely to assume the title, or the lead of the championship, sorry. Kurt Stenberg sitting in third. They're both recovering off of slowish starts to the season. Obviously, Will having a pretty good round at Simmons, but Kurt getting caught out in that third race. Tim Redmond in fourth. He's starting to build up some pace now. Went from a fourth and in a top 20 finish at Albert Park to a smooth set of all thirds. So he's got some good pace going into it. Then we've got the Two Pixel Sim Sports cars, the team that, aren't confident on their pace, team that's the second slowest in the league, second slowest driver in the league. I'll also add that Lewis reckons that Rossi is the quickest driver. The points say different because Lewis is leading Brendan Ross. Turmo sitting in seventh, so that's looking good for CRE in the team's points, which we probably will get to in a minute. Daniel Cox sitting in 8th, debutant Super 2 Series champion, doing pretty well. Joe Mugford, the other debutant in the top 10. And the top 10 is actually, it's a tied top 10 because Cheese is tied with Mugford. Mugford has the lead as a result of a better finish at Albert Park. Outside the top 10, I'll just quickly go through the rest of the 20. We've got Pete Thrower, Locky Burke, Braxton Stancliffe, Colin Warwick, Dane Liccardo, who a bit of news to talk about with him, but we'll get to him in the warm-up. Cam Rutledge is in 16th, Steve Burko, Steve Warwick, Hans Brunswick, and he's not here tonight, but Scott Stancliffe and also Corey Mcfarlane share position number 20.
Yes, there's a couple of ties in the standings overall. You can see the most obvious one there was, as you said, the Joe Mugford and Cheese tie there for what is essentially 9th and 10th place. But going to Joe Mugford on the virtue of a count back for the best finishing place that he has over Cheese throughout the season, which was at Albert Park, where he had a top 5 finish in there as well. All right, shootout. Shootout is underway, and Lewis Wedding is going to kick us off for this one in car 888. Pixel Sim Sport, Vodafone, ZB, Commodore. One of 2 that will be on the circuit tonight for the top 10 shootout. So we will keep reference to the sector splits. The first sector split comes up just on the approach to turn 3 and 4, which is at the back of the shot there. The second sector split comes up just after, or just on the approach to ITM corner, which is down towards turn 9. And then, of course, the third sector split is at the start-finish line. We're also going to keep note of what the laps were that the drivers did in qualifying to get into the shootout. So for Lewis Wedding, that was a 1 minute 21.155. And we'll make reference to see how far up and how far down Wedding is on his best sector splits. Now, importantly, what we have done in the past with the shootouts is decided whether or not we want to pull drivers in for a little bit of a chin wag after their lap. We're not going to do that with every driver. We will grab 1 or 2 as Lewis starts his lap.
So, good run there down to turn 1. It's a tricky corner here because there's a bump on the apex and a bump on the X as well. We can see the car swirling over there. But still a pretty good run for Lewis out of the turn 1-2 area. Now he's down to the hairpin. I think the slowest corner, or one of the slowest ones on the track. Very tricky corner because the apex is a lot tighter than you think it is. Another really dirty bump if you come out of that corner. Then into here, the roundabout, another bump there. Very bumpy track, but it's a street circuit. That's how you build them. And now coming out of the first sector split with a 29.267.
Not bad. He was actually only a 10th down on his best sector 1 time. So this is not a bad start to qualifying and the shootout for Lewis Wedding. Only a 10th in arrears at the moment of what he did to get into the shootout. Well, a little bit of an awkward moment through turn 8 though. Had to sort of regather the car up and get it pointing the right direction. What's his sector 2 split? It's 53.9. which was a 24.6. So that's now drifted away a little bit for Wedding. So he's about 7/10 away from what he did to get in. So right now, tracking like it's going to be a high 21, low 22 for the opening benchmark.
When on the line now, it's going to be pretty close to, I reckon, what you said. Here he comes with a 121.
Oh, he found some time.
That's actually not bad. I would say he did look a little non-committed in the through the chicane, which got him the clean run through there, but it didn't look quite on the money. That said, we've got him in the chat now. Lewis Wedding, first one out in the shootout. What was your thoughts?
That actually wasn't too bad. There's maybe 1 or 2 bits of the circuit I could have done a little bit better, but particularly the back chicane, I just didn't want to get a track cut, and to be pretty close to what I set in qualifying, I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, only 3 or 4 tenths in arrears, Lewis. It sort of looked like it was going to drift away a little bit there with a bit of an average second sector time, but you found a lot in that last sector to only be down by about 3 or 4 tenths overall. So from where we're sitting, that's actually a pretty good or close enough replica to what you did to get in. Well done.
Thank you. All
right, next man out. Braxton Stancliffe, Kiwi Sim Sport Stancliffe entry. the ZB Commodore, cart number 187. His father's watching on. The pressure's on this young man, his second ever shootout. And here we go. Into turn one, Rhodey.
Looks like a bit of a lock up there. He has managed to get to the apex. Again, very squirrely on the exit of the corner. That bump is making no friends today. Good run down, now down to the hairpin. He's got on the brakes pretty good. They actually kept it pretty straight, a little bit of wiggles. He's made the apex though. Very clean run out of the corner too. A little bit of short shift to try and keep the traction in while still getting the acceleration out of the car. Big loading of the bump there on the apex. And he's probably going to catch the one on the outside too. He is up 2/10 though. It's a 29.058 to the first sector.
Yeah, that's against Lewis Wedding's time as well. I mean, he was in a 1 minute 21.151 to get into the shootout. So he's about 2/10 behind his best sector time at the moment. Uses a lot more curb at turn 8 and a little bit more on the exit. Very, very nice with the track limits as well. Drivers have been warned to keep an eye out for how they attack turn 8. 52.799. So he's found quite a nice little chunk of change in that middle sector as well. That's actually very, very good for him. A 24.0 was his sector time in qualifying. 23.7 in sector 2 this time around. So the clock is swinging very, very nicely back the correct direction for Braxton Stancliffe. What does he do when he gets to the line? 20.6.
Cool.
Massive improvement. Huge improvement.
Definitely lost some time there to Lewis in the third sector, but was monstrous in the second sector. That line through the chicane was very much risking a cut, very much risking a bad exit, but he managed to get it hooked up. So that's a very good run for Braxton. That was going to obviously put him in provisional pole and probably going to set him comfortably, depending on how some of the next cars come out in the session.
That's a 0.5 of a second improvement over what he did to get into the shootout. That's probably one of the biggest improvements I think we've actually seen in a shootout for quite some time. Usually it's, 2 or 3 tenths one way or the other, but half a second is absolutely mega and very, very well done. And that sort of, I think, makes up for Bathurst last year when he was in the shootout and threw it away when he was driving with his father. So I think he's pretty much put those demons to bed.
100%. That was redemption for him, not only obviously in response to that, but doing it at his home track as well. So cracking run. But now we move on to Hans Brunswick.
We do indeed. Car number 111, the AOC All-Australian Racers Mustang. This is the second time he's been involved in a shootout as well. Locky, Burke and himself were involved in the Bathurst shootout last year in the Enduro Cup for the Bathurst 500. Hans to get into the shootout, 1 minute 21.099. Narrows up the entrance to turn 1. Just didn't quite stay all the way to the left. He just turned it in a little bit early. That's not a terrible thing to do. A number of drivers swear by doing it, myself included, or they feel comfortable enough doing it. Little car reaction as it goes through the bumps into turn 2. Look at the reaction here. Bang, that massive dip and a brake lock up to boot going into 3 and 4. That's that really nasty bump that I was referring to about 10 or so minutes ago, and the clock disagrees with him. It's going the other way. 29.3, slowest of all the men through Sector 1 so far.
Yeah, quality launch through that chicane. Maybe not quite as energetic as Braxton's, but that might actually help him. He obviously got back onto the ground straight a lot sooner. Very good run now through this through that corner back there. And now the run down to ITM corner. Pretty nice straight braking. He's just got to turn in a bit early, but that's actually led it to understeer slightly. He's nearly put the tie bundle on the concrete wall on the outside, so not quite a happy looking car for the AAR Mustang. Missed that second sector split, but I have a feeling he's maybe not quite where he wants to be. That said, a good run out of here could still set him up. Yeah,
so that middle sector 24.4, 29.3 in the first sector. It's going to be a high 21, if not a low 22. It's a 21.8, so 7 tenths of a second outside of what he did in qualifying to get in. And unfortunately for him, that's going the opposite way. So he's the one that I probably predicted was going to be someone in the bottom half of the 10 that was probably not going to make as drastic an improvement as they thought, or get close to their time. I didn't say who it was going to be. I just said it was going to be somebody. And it looks like, unfortunately, at this stage, that is Hans. So that provisional pole position lap for Braxton Stancliffe is looking pretty good right now. Not sure if it'll be good enough for pole, but definitely good enough to vault him up the order, as Shootout debutant and ASR Supercars debutant this year, Corey Mcfarlane, comes around the last couple of corners and onto the main straight for his first ever lap in an ASR shootout.
He's a bit of an untested property, but from what I understand, he does like to work under pressure. Massive wheel wobbles there. I don't know if we're trying to get tyre temp or what it was on the way down to the start-finish line. So we'll see whether it actually pays into anything, because that might slow his run very wobbly out of the first corner there, right into the divot before the bump. So that had the car really unstable. Good run now down to the second corner. He's made the apex more than comfortably. A little bit uncomfortable on the exit though. One of your drivers I noticed, you get out of that corner in second. It gives you more stable drive, but it is going to be a bit slower. And he is down, but only marginally on Braxton's time.
Yeah, only down, but not by a huge amount. But Braxton made most of his time up through the middle and last sectors. Oh, very much up on two wheels for a long time through the second part of the chicane. And then when the car hit the deck on the last part of the chicane, he had to gather it up and get a fistful of opposite lock, two different directions to keep it in a straight line. And the clock says we're going the wrong way here.
Yeah, that's down. He's now down 4/10 on the pole time. He might be able to recover it. That said, he has just washed wide, well wide. He actually just clipped the wall there. It seems in general maybe the AR cars maybe not quite set up for a one-lap shootout, or maybe just the pressure getting to their drivers. He's probably going to drop in. There won't be a pole time. He's going to drop in, I'd say, second if he kept it together, and he does drop into second.
Not a bad effort, actually. 20.868 to get into the shootout. 21 flat on the other side. So he actually had a pretty good last sector there as well. So that's not terrible. 2/10 outside of the time you're set to get into the shootout. It's pretty commendable. So I'd give that a thumbs up.
Yeah, it's still good to work under the pressure like that. It is his first time in a shootout, at least under the ASR branding. And yeah, he didn't fall too far off of his time. So that's still a good run, because it can go well, but it can go very much the other way in a shootout. So he's done a good job overall.
Yep, definitely done a very good job for his first shootout. This man's been in one before as well. Tim Redmond, I think this is probably shootout number 3 or 4 for him in ASR across all of the ASR series that feature the supercars. And through the last couple of corners now, through to turn 13. Got to set the run up nicely. This is the hard bit. You've got to set it up and pick up the throttle early out of the last corner. It's only a short straight. The gearing is quite short, so you need to really maximise your speed. It's up to 6th gear now, getting up to about just before 250 clicks an hour, right at the top end of the straight, about 247 I read on the dial just as he was going into turn 1, as before he hit the brakes. And here he goes into turn 2. Where does he brake? 150, just after the 150. Nice apex. Look at the onboard reaction rating with the bumps is really savage. It just really illustrates how hard it is to actually get that car settled over this really, really bumpy circuit.
100%. He's down in the first sector again, not by much. To me, it's going to come to his run through the chicane. That's not bad. A bit much air off of the third of the curbs there, but it was a flat jump, so it meant the car didn't pitch wildly when it landed. Good run here. Good, healthy use of that exit curb without getting the wheels spun up or beaching the car on it. And he's actually lost a few tenths, and he's lost the rear.
He has indeed. He's had a mistake. The first man to make a mistake. It's at ITM corner, turn 9. The rear gets away, but got to finish the lap. Just in case somebody behind him gets a curb strike, that will then at least keep him one position off the rear. But as it stands right now, really costly mistake. Gave the wall on the exit of the last corner a rub as well. And the time has gotten away from him. 1 minute 23.994. Unfortunately for Tim, the pinched brake, it looks like, going into the last corner has been a little bit costly. Tim, talk to us. The lap wasn't looking too bad until you got down to turn 9.
Yeah, the brakes just got a little bit hot, I think, and I lost the rears underneath me. So a little gutted that mistakes happen. So I'm just pleased I put a time on the board just in case someone else decides to have an even bigger mistake, to be honest. Yep,
you've echoed my sentiments entirely. The one thing you want to do is you want to put a time on the board just in case someone ahead of you doesn't make the cut. So good on you for continuing on. Best of luck for the race.
Yeah, thanks very much.
On to Brendan Ross we go here, Rhodey.
Yeah, he was getting a quite energetic start to that lap. He started that lap, I think, back at ITM corner. He was already well up to speed before I got on board with him. Good run now down to the first corner. He's made the apex pretty well there, kept it most out of the bump while still getting up to the wall. So that's probably one of the better runs I've seen out of that first corner, which is set him up quite well down into the hairpin. Brakes just past 150 board, which is about where most of the drivers are braking. Coming through here in first gear, which can give you better drive as long as you can manage the wheel spin and the bumps. Speaking of the bumps, another one catching that apex bump at the roundabout. Down again, but not by much.
No, it's all, everyone's sort of been around about that low 29, high 28 mark for Sector 1. I think the best one we've seen so far has been Braxton Stancliffe at a 28.8 for his best lap. Rossi's a bit wide. That's probably as wide as we've seen somebody go at turn 8 so far in this shootout, and the time definitely has drifted the way there. He would have had to pull the throttle out to gather the car back up because that curb can be quite nasty if you keep your foot in. Oh, and he's locked the rears going into 11 as well.
He's pushing a bit hard now. I think what happened there for him as he comes down at the last corner, he's just kept it off the wall, bit of boot full of gas to help turn the car. I think what happened was he actually made the apex sooner than you planned on doing, which meant he had to wind back out and have another crack at it. This ended up being a 121.328 for Brendan Ross. Not bad. He does finish originally 30 years ahead of his teammate, but not as nearly as far ahead as I think he wanted to be.
No, definitely not. 1 minute 21.3 for Rossi, and to get in it was 120.623. So definitely clock going the other way. Same with Redmond, but Redmond's mistake was fairly obvious as to why he lost all of his time. And those two are actually pretty close originally in the standings. They were both on a 120.6 and not separated by very much. Will Devenish, he was only a tenth of a second quicker to get into the shootout than Rossi, 1 minute 20.573. So what can the driver of the number 15 CRE Race Engineering Mustang do, Rhodey?
Yeah, he's no stranger to the shootouts. I remember he said he's had more than his fair share of shootouts not go the way he's wanted them to. So if he's by no means a friend of the shootout format, but he's got the track on himself now. Let's see how he goes. Very, very wide, actually. Very different line through turn 1. It might be faster. It just doesn't look it. He tracked well deeper the corner and almost tried to straight line the extra to the corner. It's going to give him potentially give him a better run down into here, but it's not really a place to get a run like that. That said, not bad of a run through the hairpin, and we come down now to the roundabout. He's managed to dodge the worst of the curb, worst of the bump, sorry, but that pushes him a little further wide of the initial apex. That said, not too far off again. That 29.2 bracket, a lot of drivers falling into.
That 0.4 of a second sort of gap that everybody's sort of trying to drop into here, 28.8 to 29.2 for Sector 1. That's where everybody seems to be. And I think a lot of people are just maybe keeping a little bit in the tank and making sure that they get through the chicane unscathed and then really push on in the second half of the lap. Although I haven't seen a sector time flash up for Sector 2, so I think he's been given a track strike for this. So this is coming back to precisely what Tim Redmond was talking about a few minutes ago, is that you've got to put a time on the board just in case. And yes, no Sector 2 time for Will Devenish. So that is the end of that. I expect him to, he's going to go through and finish the lap anyway, but the live timing has not awarded him a time, and he is the first victim. And just looking back at what happened in the shootout there was at the last part of the chicane, there was a moment he had where I saw the back end of the car really kick up violently out of the last part of the chicane, and I think that's where it's happened.
Yeah, that's a shame. Will's one of the drivers I expected, as we're coming into the top end now of the qualifying drivers, one of the drivers I expected to finally be able to usurp Braxton Stancliffe and get ahead of him, but Will's out of the count. He's not in the out of the count. He's down the top 10, so we get another shootout that hasn't quite gone his way. And now we're on to the last of the AAR drivers in Locky Burke.
Locky Burke hopefully can continue his good hot form for the night going. To get into the shootout for him, it was a 1 minute 20.495 So he was the first of the drivers to be in the 1 minute 20 bracket. Everybody underneath him was in the 19s. There was a 19.2 for Rosella, which is ironically a new track record, and Kurt Stenberg at a 19.380. They were the only two drivers sub 1 minute 20 for qualifying. What can Burke do? Oh, lock break.
No.
That's going to be costly. Big costly for Locky Burke.
That was deeper than Will's line, and I'm not even sure Will's line was planned. That was a lock-up. That was something. That was definitely not what he wanted. He's going to be on the back foot. He's going to have to try and recover something from here, and you don't really want to have to... It helps having something go wrong this early, but it also sets you off well off a plan. That was not a corner to make a mistake in. That said, he has still got a legal track time, a lap time underneath him. Very slidey rear through the roundabout there. He's 8.10 soft, not a surprise considering his initial start to this lap. Big run through the curb there. He's actually probably made a bit of time there if he hasn't picked up a cut, because that did look quite quick. And pretty good run out of here as well. Good use of the curb without getting the rear under him. Hugged the wall nicely without catching a little bit of wall that sticks out, as you see there as they come out of the corner. And he's gone. He slipped a little bit, but not nearly as much as I thought he would considering his first run. So he's only lost another 10th or so. That's still going to set him up potentially to still be ahead of Hans Brunswick. Yeah,
that'll be what he's targeting now, is to sort of get sort of top half a dozen spots if he can make that happen. But that lock up at turn 1 looks like it might be fairly costly. 21.3, nothing to be frowned upon there. So worst is going to be in 6th place. So it's not a bad sort of spot to be, but Burke, what could have been turn 1, looks like that probably brought your lap undone there, buddy. Bad luck.
Yeah, I just got on the brakes for turn 1. I don't think I warmed up the brakes enough and just didn't stop. So unlucky, but went out there, had a crack, did what I could do, but now I'm going to make it up throughout the race.
That's it. We got pace on board, the number 112, and throughout qualifying and practice, it looks like you were pretty consistent and pretty happy with your time. So let's hope that carries through for the race. Good luck.
Thank you.
Send him on his way, and now we get down to provisional front row. Kurt Stenberg a little bit out of sorts going into ITM corner, went a little bit too deep there, but managed to gather it up. And already starting the lap quite early, Rhodey, here I can see him getting very close to just about every wall he can find.
Yeah, started that well early. I'm not sure if he was maybe trying to get a bit more tyre temp through ITM there, or pushed way too early on tyres that weren't quite there. That said, he should have the car underneath him now. Run down to turn 1. A pretty good run. Gets the car stopped. Actually, almost a bit of a I can use the word almost a bit of a yeast into turn 1 the way that car turned in. He's got some very good turning with his setups usually, Kurt Stenberg, and it seems to be following on again tonight. A little bit later on the brakes there than the rest of the cars we've seen. Still makes it to the apex, so we're not sure whether it was a slower run out of turn 1 for him or what that was. But good performance on the brakes for the TTR number 47. Nice run through the roundabout. He's managed to dodge the best of the bumps. He's still down on Braxton's time through the first sector.
He is. Let's have a look at his line through the chicane. 1, 2. Oh, I would not be surprised to see the clock disagree with him there, that very well might be a track strike. That looked really awkward getting through the chicane. But let's see what it says when he gets down to the sector split right about now. No, he actually has found some time. So he's found out how to get that line working through the chicane. So looks like he got away with one there, because I was worried that was very close to a strike. Through the last couple of corners, looking good for a provisional front row here. Using the shortest possible way to the line. And 20.0, he does. He goes up all the way to provisional front row. And for a minute there, Kurt, I wasn't so sure that you were going to have a time on the board. Through the chicane looked a little bit unusual, but it was in your favour.
Yeah, the car was airborne over the last curve there. It was unusual. I thought I'd gone in and I was a bit cheeky and a bit overcommitted, but turns out we maximised it to the ultimate there.
Absolutely, and your last sector was very good to go along with it. Put you on the front row provisionally, and it looks like you're going to possibly be there with just Luke Rosella to go.
Yeah, hopefully on the front. Well, I am on the front row, but hopefully maybe we can start off pole. But either way, it's good to be on the front row, and hopefully we're going to go strong in this race. But we're pretty weak in the first sector tonight, so I'm unsure why that is.
Well, we'll see what happens when we get to the back end of this lap with Luke Rosella on his lap roadie.
Yeah, pretty good run there through turns 1 and 2. Very clean run, actually. Big use of the bump at the apex of the roundabout, though. Hasn't affected him much. He's the first. He's not only up on Braxton through the first sector, he's up on Kurt through the first sector. Very greedy run through the chicane. If that's not a cut, I'm going to be eating my shoe, because he made the wall on the outside there.
And he's outside the track limits there as well at turn 8. So that's a bit of a concern for me and a red flag. He's actually gone too far.
And he hasn't picked up a second sector time. So, yeah, that has been a
wow.
That will put him to the back. I think that technically puts him in 9th in qualifying. But by all means, he had to have a pretty big lunge at it to try and beat Kurt's time, because he was the first driver to really line that curb up right. Here he comes into the lane. So, yeah, definitely not the lap.
He's filthy. He's quite filthy with himself there too. He's actually given the wall a pretty hefty whack on the run into the pits as well. So, wow. Championship leader and straight into the garage face first. So, not a good qualifying session there for the defending series champion, Rody.
No, not a happy camper by any means. As I said, though, you'd be pushing pretty hard at the top end of a shootout to really assert the times. It all really came down to the way you drove through that second sector, and particularly get that chicane. That was Kurt's line. We were pretty sure was a hack, and it was legal, but by golly, he was nearly applying for a job with Air New Zealand. And Luke Rosella, one better. That was IRL. I think he would have ripped a corner off that car the way it went through there. He's lucky it hasn't, and that the car's still in one piece for the race. But he'll be starting from the back end of the top 10. And it's going to be pretty spicy, because he'll be starting alongside one of his great rivals.
He will indeed. He's going to be starting right alongside Will Devenish down there at the back. I do apologise. So, the top 10 reveals Kurt Stenberg on the pole. Front row start, maiden front row start in ASR Supercars for Braxton Stancliffe. So, that early lap really was to his benefit. He has launched himself up the order. Corey Mcfarlane, Brendan Ross, Locky, Burke, and then we're the top 5.
Yeah, and then Locky, Burke, Lewis Wedding in 6th. Good run for him in the end. Made some mistakes, but wasn't the worst of those making mistakes. Hans Brunswick with a healthy wobble early on, and Tim Redmond, obviously we caught walking the rears through ITM. That's put him to the back of the guys that did set times. And then, as we then went on and mentioned, Will Devenish and Luke Rosella both picking up track cuts in the second sector through that chicane, and starting in the back of the top 10. That's really what we're kind of looking for from a shootout. That it's high action, and it's just a really good chance to see some of the guys really push their cars, because you don't really get a chance to see that, especially in a 200k race format that's coming up, because outright pace isn't really the name of the game when you're trying to run the car to whatever strategy you've got planned. And I'd say based off of that, I hope you got some information from Daniel Cox Designs on what a race strategy might look like.
Yes, I do. We've got that to bring up in a few moments' time. We're going to take a short break here, ladies and gentlemen. We've just got to do to set the grid for the race coming up, because we've got to put sort of 2 sets of standings together to work out who's in what position for qualifying and the whatnot. So don't go anywhere. There's still plenty of Supercars action to come. The 2022 ASR Supercars Championship is proudly brought to you by Cam Rutledge Electrical, a licensed electrical contractor in Nowra, New South Wales. And Beyond Electrical, specialists in electrical, domestic, commercial, industrial and maintenance work in Auckland, New Zealand. The ASR team would also like to pay thanks to those businesses that helped us over the course of the 2021 season. Matt Harvey Repair and Tune, Smith & Sons Renovations and Extensions, Design, Plan, Construct. Penrite, a better class of oil since 1926. Ryco Filters, the professional's choice since 1936. And Milwaukee Tool, nothing but heavy duty. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for bearing with us for a few moments. We had to set the grid for the race, and it looks like that's all been done and dusted, and all the drivers are getting themselves psyched up and ready for the 59-lap race that lies ahead. Really importantly, when we look back at the last time we raced around this circuit, not only was it a maiden win in ASR Supercars for Luke Rosella back in 2020, it was also the same format, minus the top 10 shootout.
It was, yeah. It was. We're running, yeah. As I remember back then, as a driver, 2020 was. Struggling to remember. 2020 was a rough season for whatever reason for our team. I can't even accurately recall what livery I ran. Yeah, it was a good race in 2020. The track bit more so than it does now, obviously with the rework and the improvements we've made through the back section to make it a little less deadly. No, it's still a really good race. Definitely some interesting stuff happening at the front end of the field. But yeah, it's a few drivers that were racing with us 2 years ago will have that experience tucked away at the back of their brain somewhere that they'll be able to, if they can find the path to it, they can pull it out and maybe use some of it again tonight.
Yeah, we certainly hope so. There's, I think, only about probably half the field that's here tonight would have been there for that race back in 2020, and there's been plenty of drivers that have found a bit more time from their original times that year, despite the fact that there has been, of course, those modifications to the back chicane. So people have worked out that they can make their time up in other places, which I think is probably an interesting point to note. Also, some of the cars have been through several changes over the course of the time as well, with ride height settings, suspension settings, and so on and so forth, as the field is underway here. Righty, let's have a look at this field of 23 cars before they all get back around.
Absolutely. Starting from pole is Kurt Stenberg, one of the few drivers to get through the chicane quickly and live. Starting beside him in second, made in a front row start for Braxton Stancliffe, the sole Kiwi Simsport Stancliffe entry tonight. Shout out to all the supporters for the Stancliffe car watching elsewhere. Third is Corey Mcfarlane, the first of the AAR entries. A good run for Corey, with Brendan Ross in fourth first to the Pixel Simsports cars. Fifth is Locky Burke, who managed to split the Pixel Simsports cars in the shootout, with Lewis Wedding in sixth. Seventh is Hans Brunswick in the black and red AOC back entry, with Tim Redmond in eighth, the other Kiwi in the top 10 shootout. Ninth is Luke Rosella, one of the two knots at a time, with Will Devenish behind him in 10th, the other knots at a time. New colours for Dane Liccardo as of this round for the rest of the season, now running under the Liccardo Racing Powered by CRE moniker, with backing from PID Automotive. Starting from 11th with Nathan Higginson in 12th for the Kiwi Simsports Automech division. 13th is Joe Mugford for TriStar Racing, continuing that good debut form that he's had so far this year, with Ben Hall in 14th. Good run for him in qualifying that we kind of missed out on. 15th for Steve Burke of Serie Motorsport, another good run actually for Burke. He's been a little quiet so far this season, but good to see some form somewhat appearing for him, with Daniel Cox starting from 16th. Tomo starting from 17th. I remember him mentioning in the chat this is a bit of a boogie track for him, so we'll see how he goes through the race. With Steve Warwick, the sole Warwick Racing Team car, in 18th. Unfortunately, Colin Warwick unable to make it tonight due to dinner. 19th for Cam Rutledge from Serie Motorsport, with NZ Snipes in the top 20 for Team Hanifa's Kiwi Simsports division. Cheese in 21st for the Kiwi Simsports Team Automech, with Peter Thrower in 22nd. And Locky Lock starting off the back of the grid after his slight faux pas in the last race at Sims Plains last week.
Yes, those remembering that he had that incident that triggered the safety car in the third and final race at Simmons Plains last time out, as the field comes to the line.
I think we're getting everyone pretty well lined up. It does seem to be giving small advantages to cars on the left of the grid ever so slightly. Well, Kurt does seem a long way back from his painted box, but I think everyone lined up. You can see some angle from your cars back, and there we go, they're all lined up. So we've got 23 cars ready to go for a start.
We certainly do. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. The 2022 edition of the Hamilton 200 is underway. And here we go, off into turn 1. And Kurt Stenberg loses out position to Braxton Stancliffe at start, but Stancliffe goes wide and hits the wall. And there's a local yellow flag there, and Stancliffe has now gone back into P2, so he was ahead for a millisecond, just a couple of metres of road, and already a little bit of a braking mistake for Stancliffe going into the braking zone at 2. Stenberg a bit wide, immediately in behind car 187, so a little bit of bump and grind at the start of this race, but at the moment, it's Stancliffe in the 187 who surges to the front.
Yeah, we won't have a chance to look back at what caused that yellow, but I did see 2 of the the AAR cars involved. Kurt Stenberg, monumental run through that chicane, so clearly he's got that dialed in for a race setting. Either that or just very much unsighted under the rear wing of the 187. Braxton still holds the lead though. They're actually pulling a little bit of a breakaway from Corey Mcfarlane in 3rd, who's actually holding up his boss in Luke Rosella in 4th. Kurt Stenberg, big dive down the inside, not really going to make it.
He'll have him here. He'll have
another run here.
Yep, he'll have him here at turn 11, or just a little bit wide. Rub the wall.
The wall, and actually it's somewhat helped Braxton because he's managed to he's bounced back across the track, which is somewhat blocked Kurt. So Braxton will lead the first lap of the Hamilton 200.
Just going back and having a little bit of a quick look at what happened at turn 1, the calamity that happened down there. We actually have got a little bit of a replay, which we will cut to now. We can actually see what happened at that part of the circuit. You're right, there was AAR cars involved. Here is the replay of what happened. So Rosella was up the inside pretty quickly, and it looks like it's Brunswick into the back of Burke, then across the front of Wedding, and then Devenish was actually caught up in that as well. So there's a fair bit of dodgem cars and bumper cars going on there, and I think there'll definitely be a bit of an incident to be reviewed there, because that's one of the shortest runs to turn 1 throughout the season. I think it is the shortest run. The next one I think is probably either Simmons or Barbagallo that are pretty short, but for Brunswick that puts him second to last on the grid at the moment, and Devenish also outside the top 15, so too Locky, Burke, but he's made up. He's actually one spot behind Devenish. Wedding lost out and went to 8, all the way to 13th as we go back to the lead. Rosella's already up to P3, and he's now threatening Stancliffe for P2.
Oh, that's very willing stuff at the front here. It's something we sort of missed in all that as well. Also equally, most of the drivers at the front, you know, not great friends potentially. So definitely some very willing action here. Kurt Stenberg, the way he's running through that chicane, was definitely behind Braxton. I think Braxton kind of wanted to let him through because he was looking like a cruise missile at the back of Braxton when he went through the chicane.
Way too deep. Way too deep.
Entirely.
Yep, and he's had to do a full...
Let Braxton back into the lead, but only by a bump. He's going to have to outbrake Kurt here. He has got the option of the inside run through here. Kurt can do a cut back though. But Braxton returns to the lead, and all that it's moved Luke down. I think outside the top 10. It's promoted Tim Redmond out to 4th with one of the Pixel Simsports cars now running at the top 5.
Yeah, that's Brendan Ross back there because Lewis Wedding was caught up in that turn 1, lap 1 incident. And for Luke Rosella, that actually sent him all the way back down to P7. He's right behind Dane Liccardo now as well, who's in there behind Brendan Ross. Now, these two no strangers to each other either, Liccardo and Rosella. And there has been a little bit of Morse code there. There's a few drivers going a little bit wide on the exit of turn 8. If I look Rosella here, he obviously had a really good start.
No.
Oh no, there's been an incident. There's been an incident at turn 1, and it's Redmond and it's Stenberg, and there's some reversing into traffic going on there as well as Stenberg tries to get himself turned around. And there's balking. Oh dear, oh me. There's all sorts going on the approach thing. Has Stenny got a flat?
I think so. I can tell you what happened. We'll obviously have to go back to the replay and catch that, but it was very willing stuff at the front. Kurt Stenberg nearly trying to dive into the back of Braxton Stancliffe at ITM corner to get a pass done. He's ended up getting out of position there, and then he's ended up getting caught up with Corey Mcfarlane.
Oh, that's a fairly savage whack there as well. And then they've run side by side through here. Stenny's just lost it on his own. Actually far out wide. Mcfarlane was there, and then, oh, that's nasty. He hasn't held the brake, and then tried to flick spin the car into traffic. Good evasive action by, 3, 4, 5 cars in that one there as well. So that's a really odd lose for Stenny.
Yeah, so what that has done, that has actually triggered a safety car and all that. I don't think maybe the incident itself triggered it. I remember it was a fixed yellow through that sector, but I imagine with the reversing, with trying to reposition the car, and maybe just as a follow-on of Kurt Stenberg, potentially with a puncture, they're trying to get the car going again. The safety car has eventually been called. Makes sense. There would be a few body panels running around there, and already definitely some very frayed tempers. And it's only lap 4 of 9-lap race. It's going to be a very long night for some of these drivers. What it has left us with is Braxton Stancliffe in first, although that lead that he had, that he was building with the other guys, has been cut pretty healthily. Tim Redmond has managed to sneak up to second. Corey Mcfarlane has actually kept it in third despite being involved in the incident with Kurt Stenberg. So probably benefiting from the gap they had a little bit to only have dropped one spot. It now moves Brendan Ross up to fourth. Dane Liccardo, very good start actually, probably benefiting from some of the chaos around him, but also keeping it very clean. He's up to fifth. Luke Rosella already back up to sixth. Again, outside of his overrun, he's just getting back on the train of things again and back up to sixth. Choma up to seventh. Nathan Higginson in eighth. Ben Hall, big driver, already up to ninth, and Steve Burke in the top 10.
Yeah, there's a few drivers that have found their way up the order here. The biggest mover so far in the right direction was actually Turmo, up 10 spots, and he was up to what is case. He's actually now 12 spots because he's up inside P5, because there have been a number of drivers that have decided to take service here. So Luke Rosella's come out of his position inside the top 10 to make a stop. So too's Corey Mcfarlane. He's now come out of what was third place to make a stop. And Locky Burke in as well. Now, Burke was caught up in that turn 1 incident. He was a bit further down the order. Mcfarlane was third. Devenish was also caught up in the turn 1 incident, and he hasn't stopped. So, or from what I'm seeing on my screen, he hasn't been in, because Stenberg has been in and is still actually his tail end of the field at the moment. But
there were a few cars, I believe, that pitted the lap through before, and one of them potentially might have been Hans Brunswick. He was obviously caught up in that race 1 incident, but he's just passed Locky Burke, who's just exited the lane.
He came in with Kurt Stenberg. So when Stenberg came in, when the safety car was called and he was still trying to recover the car, Brunswick, who was at the tail end of the field, came in along with him. So there's been about 5 cars come into the lane so far.
So yeah, what that's done is moved a lot of the big movers to the back end of the grid. Will Devenish 17th, Corey Mcfarlane 19th, Luke Rosella 20th, Hans Brunswick maybe not quite one of the big movers, but he's back in 21st. Burke in 22nd, and Kurt Stenberg just come through for a second pit stop there. Not sure, maybe just something to get back on strategy after repairing damage and or a tyre earlier. Maybe split the stop to try and avoid going a lap down.
Might be a top off of fuel here, Brady. I think it was probably a very short transit through the lane that we were looking at there for Kurt Stenberg.
But he's safety car hasn't stayed. He did come very close to going a lap down there. He's just exited the pit lane. He's going to run down to turn 2 as safety car with the rest of the field is coming down the front straight. So had that been any longer of a stop, he would have been in trouble. We don't anticipate, we'd like to think there won't be too many more safety cars, but you don't want to rely on a safety car to get yourself back off of a lap down, especially this early in the race, because if you're lap down, it's very hard to make progress because you're going to be constantly under a blue flag.
Yeah, correct. That's the hard bit. You don't sort of want to be caught out with being under a blue flag for all the race. Well, it gives us a bit of an opportunity actually to have a look at our race facts with thanks to Daniel Cox Design. This is the race facts for the Hamilton Street Circuit. We're only 5 or 6 laps in as the field comes through the hairpin here. 3.4 Ks, there's 13 turns, 59 laps is the duration. You can see pit stops, well, you're going to have to in a 200k race. As much as we don't run the mandatory stop rule in ASR Supercars, the length of the race will dictate what needs to happen. And you can see there the pit transit time is quite large if you need to do a big stop. So if you need to come in, 4 tyres, full tank of fuel and transit the lane, you're staring down the barrel of the equivalent of a lap time here. So odds are you will go a lap down if you are doing a stop under green flag. And then the fuel range is 20 to 22 laps. So with a 59 lap race and a little bit of fuel saving going on here, the drivers that have come in to top off fuel and get a few things done, they've actually got themselves off sequence to the rest of the field. So that's the important piece of the puzzle that we need to factor in there, Rhodey, is that they're off sequence to everybody, and when everybody else is probably going to come in sort of around about lap 22, 23, 24 now, because of the safety car and fuel saving, some of these other drivers are probably going to come in about 3 or 4 laps later. So if they can make some time through the field, they'll be in a very, very healthy position come the first proper sequence of stops.
Yeah, it'll be down to potentially a future safety car that might bring them back on strategy. Speaking of the safety car, I believe it's about to pull into the lane. I see Braxton Stancliffe giving it plenty of room, and lights are off. It's pulling into the lane. So we're going to get our chance at the first restart to this race. The field is under control of the 187 of Braxton Stancliffe, and we're not far off the start here.
You can see Tim Redmond as well giving Braxton plenty of room on the single file restart to the line. And the green actually doesn't come out until you get pretty close to the line. Now, Corey Mcfarlane's been issued a 10-second stop-go penalty there. I'm not sure. I think that might be to do with the car that he should actually be following. We'll have to go back and have a little bit of a double check at that one. But as it stands right now, Braxton Stancliffe leads the field away.
Yeah, Braxton leads away. Tim Redmond in second, probably potentially going to play tail gunner here. We'll see that in the next few laps as the pace starts to work its way out. Dan Liccardo's got an excellent jump there. From what I can see, it all was pretty legal, but he managed to jump the cars ahead of him. He's now up to third, with Brendan Ross back in fourth and Higginson in fifth. Terma up to sixth as well. But I will say, very clean, very proper restart, especially after what we saw at Albert Park. So good to see the Supercars drivers have been practicing.
Absolutely. Good to see that they've definitely all been practicing. As a bit further down the order, they're launching through the chicane. There is Corey Mcfarlane with the stop-go penalty there. Now, I'm just actually having a bit of a quick look just to see what happened there. It looks like he was actually in the right spot through all of that. So it looks like that penalty is probably going to be rescinded as the... So just looking to see where it was. He was actually following, I think it's just to do with the rules that have actually been put into place for being in a single file.
Yeah, just looking on board, Corey, just looking in the background, with Rosella trying to come back through the field as well. Was battling on there with Pete Thrower, and Pete Thrower was making him earn it. A bit of contact through the last couple of corners. Actually, Will Devenish is buying this 3 wide run down into the first corner. Will's actually got through there in the end. But yeah, I'm shuffling back up to the front of the... Actually, I'll say that. I'm going to keep an eye on these two for a bit, because they're going to have a pretty willing battle. As we mentioned, they're not friends.
Oh, there's
and they're both having a battle through the pack. Actually, Hans Brunswick as well, trying to bind to this as well.
There's a pretty willing battle going on up the front here as well. As Nathan Higginson was actually ahead of Brendan Ross. Termo's bought into this one as well, and he's gone through into P5 ahead of Brendan Ross. So despite the fact that he thinks that this is a bit of a bogey track, Termo's actually having a pretty solid run right now at the moment. Next man in the queue to have a go at Brendan Ross is going to be the Super 2 points leader, Ben Hall.
Yeah, and he had a pretty good run there as well. Rossi, I'm not sure whether his tyres are at a position or what's happening with his car. Just the rear is definitely not too happy for him.
Sorry, Rhodey. McFarlane's slow. I'm not sure what happened there. It looks like he had a moment through the chicane because it was very slow and pulled right over to the far side of the track. Let's go and have a quick look to see what happened there. He was sort of a bit further down the order. He was in behind Lewis Wedding. And what's happened here? Oh, he's tagged the wall. He's tagged the wall and had a moment. Now, I'm wondering if he's had some sort of a moment here. I was watching, I think it was one of the iRacing rounds recently. I think it might have been the 250k race around Road Atlanta, and he had a wheel issue, had to pull over to the side of the road and reset it. I'm wondering if he's had a similar moment there.
Entirely possible, and we've seen a few guys already this season having issues with wheels one way or another. So if that was the case, that'd be a shame. Although if the wheel went on him through the chicane, he did a good job bringing it relatively under control. And it's early enough in the race that he can still recover and get back into this again.
Yeah, he did an awesome job to keep it under control if that was the case.
Absolutely. Just going back to the front, what I said as we got underway, it seems to be panning out. Tim Redmond, I don't think he's outright slower than Braxton Stancliffe to the point where he couldn't stick with him, but Braxton has built a 2.5 second gap, and Tim Redmond's currently dealing with / fending off Dan Liccardo for third. Dan's got some good pace on board as well. And Tim, and possibly as well, just one of the drivers that stayed out is trying to, I'd say, probably trying to get the car to a point where he can maybe push it onto the same strategy as the leaders and just generally try and make some more out of the stint than is what otherwise possible.
Well, we're on board with Tim Redmond now, Rhodey, so you tell me, because of course you've got the audio, I haven't, because of the broadcast rights here. Is there a bit of lift and coast in this going on, or is he actually sort of pushing but not pushing too hard and maybe going along that sort of lines of strategy?
No, sorry, he's got closer than I thought he'd be. Sorry, I was looking at Braxton in front. I don't think he's so much lifting and coasting. He might just be maybe even conserving the tyres a little more than maybe the fuel. It depends on where the strategy sits on how long the softs are going to last. I know that we had the softs running out until about probably our 16, 17 lap. We had 15 lap races in Super 2. And from memory, they were getting pretty rubbish towards the back end of that distance. So if you're trying to make them last the fuel distance, you probably have to conserve the tyres a little bit. And I imagine that's maybe what Tim's thinking here, is to get the tyres to make it to where the fuel window falls for him, rather than having to go off the tyres. That said, he has stabilised pretty well. He's only lost another 10th or so to Braxton Stancliffe there. Dane's pretty stable up behind him now as well. He's a little closer, but again, only a 10th or so. So things are looking pretty steady here. And I imagine Dane, very much a racy guy, very much angling for those top 10s and whatnot this season, and trying to put together a good season. But at the same time, he's in third. This is a very good spot for where he sort of expected himself to be, and sort of where his pace dictates he maybe should be. So he's probably pretty happy to not push the envelope too much, and risk having the entire thing fall out from underneath him.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And on top of that, it's a very good thing for the Kiwi teams at the moment, because they've got 3 of their teams represented in the top 4 spots at the moment. The 4th place man is actually, he's calling himself the honorary Kiwi, Nathan Higginson. I think there's been a bit of talk about what he actually has to do to earn that moniker as an honorary Kiwi. Some people have actually suggested that he needs to go and get a taxidermied sheep as his, initiation into the Kiwi fold. It'd have to be a new one. It can't be a used one. I don't know. I actually thought maybe he should get a red hot poker and brand him property of KSS or something now. But no, I think the taxidermied sheep, I think he'll be thinking about being probably the preferred option. As we saw Ben Hall just whack the wall on the exit of the chicane there. He's finally, after a couple of laps ago, managed to get past Termo. And there's a fair old train here, Rhodey, behind Brendan Ross starting to form. Look at them all. They're all up at the whole run, all the way from turn 8 right the way down to turn 9. There's a massive lash up of cars just lining up behind people.
Yeah, something I've just noticed as well. I just come back to try and find out what had happened. It's too late back for a replay, but we have lost Steve Warwick from this race, unfortunately, very early on. So not sure whether he's maybe caught a track cut and maybe felt like he wasn't going to get the race distance, or had a bad moment of chicane and potentially took a corner off the car that way. But you're right, it is a monumental train behind Brendan Ross. It's twice this season that we've caught Pixel Sim Sports drivers being the cork in the bottle. Very different end of the race to the last one we saw, which was Lewis Wedding at the end of race 3 at Albert Park. Brendan Ross, it looks like he's actually.
I just saw something there. I just saw something there, Rhodey.
I felt like, I'd say from what I saw, I felt like he gave him a bit of a run. A bit more than we potentially saw from Lewis. But it's entirely up to drivers how they would do things. He's actually given, I think, a bit more of a helping hand to Kurt Stenberg there. Or to be fair, might be an honest assessment for Rossi on where his pace sits. He isn't as quick as Kurt, and probably not as quick as Luke. So he's probably picking and choosing his battles where he wants to. He's probably going to put up a bit more of a stone wall for the cars coming behind him in Steve Burke and Joe Mugford, who are a bit more of his pace.
Yeah, I think so. Just coming out of turn 2, I just saw the flash of the brake lights as Rosella was on his inside and he didn't want to fight it, especially going through that really nasty bump in turn 3. We've got a yellow flag down here in sector 3. Yeah, there's some skid marks on the track there, and I think you're right. I think there's been, you're right. Peter Thrower's down the escape road at turn 11. He's doing the right thing. He's done the flick spin. He's waited for the gap in the traffic, and he's gone through. So I'm wondering if Thrower has had some dramas and has been through the lane once or twice, because he's now officially gone a lap down rather early in this race, which I wasn't expecting to see, with the fact the safety car had already been out on track.
No, so potentially a pit lane visit at some point there for Pete. He doesn't seem to be quite as settled as he might otherwise be. He did start off towards the back of the grid, so We mentioned it being a very tricky track. A lot of guys, whether they were the Aussies or the Kiwis in the internationals, not necessarily the biggest fan of Hamilton last week in Dev Series, and despite being a native for this track, maybe it's not quite going his way as well. I'm looking at a battle right now between Luke Rosella and Ben.
We're watching it. We're watching it here, and there's a bit of panel rubbing.
Oh, no.
And Hall! I'm not sure if he got spilt there or not, or if he just had a moment over the curb. I think he might have had the moment over the curb, but he's been mugged. He's been mugged by both Stenberg and Rosella there. They've both gone through, so that puts them up into 6th and 5th respectively. And the next man they're going to have to target is going to be Nathan Higginson. So he is, what's he there on the timing charts? About 2.4 seconds up the road. So they'll probably reel that in fairly quickly. And look at the field. Look at them all streaming past the static camera on the wall there. There's several battles going on up and down this field. That there's so many of them going on, we don't know where to look. So we've got the Brendan Ross train. So you've got Rossi recovering Locky Burke. Will Devenish also recovering. He's now down the inside of Locky Burke. And Joe Mugford's sort of on the back end of the top 10 here as well. Then you go back to the next trio of cars, which is just behind them. You've got Corey Mcfarlane, Termo, and Hans Brunswick. Of course, Hans was involved in that lap 1, turn 1 incident. He's recovering. He's now down the inside of Termo at turn 2. And someone's flashing some lights.
He wasn't pleased. Like Hans ran him. I don't think Hans ran him out of road there. He very much drove. He didn't quite drive around the car. He drove around the car with contact, if there's a phrase for that. I think it was all a bit fair. Just Termo probably not feeling like he was given quite the room he wanted, and he's let Hans Brunswick know of that. But Hans has already sort of moved on to a bigger picture. No, good little train going on there. Corey Mcfarlane up at the back of Joe Mugford. We missed it actually in catching all that, but Will Devenish and Locky Burke both getting through on Brendan Ross. So not quite the same Pixel Sim Sports cork in a bottle that we're seeing at Albert Park, because it's a bit of a leaky cork this time around.
Yeah, it definitely is. And Will Devenish just had a little mistake, a little bobble through turn 11. Oh, both Brunswick and Termo gave the exit wall at turn 13. A nice old exchange of paint there as well, as we just had a new fastest lap of the race set by Kurt Stenberg with a purple middle sector of the boot as well. So 1 minute 20.736. It's only a tenth and a little bit away from the current race lap record as well, which is a 20.6 held by Stenberg the last time we were here.
They have just both cycled through Nathan Higgins as well. Nathan Higgins got a bit of a fight for Luke Rosella down towards the hairpin, but got a little unsettled over the bumps in the braking and actually trimmed the outside wall a little bit there. But they're both now through, and their next target now is going to be Dan Liccardo, Dan Liccardo and Tim Redmond. They're a little bit up the track, and I imagine at this point, as I mentioned, Dane and Tim probably pretty happy to run their own strategies, run their own races, and not risk something that isn't really worth it. But at this point, that gap is coming down bit by bit from Luke Rosella and from Kurt Stenberg, and they might not be able to eliminate the pass, but they can at least delay it. So a little later in the race, maybe to a point where it works a bit more favourable for their strategy. But I think at this point, Dane's probably tapping on Tim's shoulder, just going, buddy, we need to get going here. We've got trouble coming. Yeah,
well, I think Dane Liccardo will be looking in the rearview mirror and on his timing chart right now, and you'll see that these two cars up behind him are coming along quite quickly. There's a 1.1 second differential in the lap time in favour of Luke Rosella at the end of the last lap. And I've noticed as well that Braxton Stancliffe seems to be having a little bit of a drama with his tyres at the moment as well. His sector times are well down. His sector 1 time is a 29.9 relative to the two cars behind, 29.7, 29.6. So they are catching them. And then, of course, Rosella and Stenberg, who both came in during the sequence of stops, their tyres are a little bit better as well. So they are gaining time. And I think all 5 of these cars are sort of all going to converge around about the same sort of time, right as we're getting to the stage of the first sequence of stops for the lead 3 cars.
Yeah, the guys at actually all the guys had the queue didn't have the advantage last week of running Super 2, Dev Series, to know where the tyres would sit them. I know Dane would have been preference. Actually, Braxton coming into the lane pretty early actually as well, which leads to where I was going, is these tyres were probably going a little bit far. He maybe could have pushed them a little further outside. I don't know how he's been driving them. even under a safety car, be pitting after, what is that going to be, maybe 13 race laps. He's been pushing the car hard. So I don't know, this might work out from the other way around, but Braxton Stancliffe into the lane, actually, just something I've noticed as well. We've also lost Cameron Rutledge from this race in the last minute or so as well.
Yes, he's only completed 14 laps, so that was about 2 laps ago. You're right. So Braxton Stancliffe in. Now, importantly, that's a little bit short of where he probably would have liked those tyres to get to. Now, I don't know what sort of tyre strategy a few drivers have employed here, but Corey Mcfarlane's made a move there and at Steve Burke the last time, and maybe some drivers have gone with the hard tyre or the soft tyre, but you got your eyes on something there, Rhodey.
I'm seeing some trouble of a different sort here. Just looking at who else has pitted. Nathan Higginson has pitted, as has Chemo, as has Cheese.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
Cheese and Higginson pitting they're sharing a pit boom.
They are indeed.
They're doing it properly, which means Cheese is about to get, well, it could have been worse, but Cheese is going to lose time that really wasn't worth losing. And if he had the tyres, if I were Cheese, I would have gone another lap.
Yeah, or they would have gone side by side. I mean, there's plenty of room in the pit bays to actually do it. Now, importantly, where did Braxton Stancliffe come out? Turmo came into the lane as well, and here comes Redmond and here comes Liccardo. So they're looking at the tyres here, I think, and going, you know what? Tyres, the soft variety, are probably not going to make it. Maybe they are using and abusing them a little bit too much. So in comes Redmond and Liccardo. In comes Ben Hall. Here comes Steve Burke as well. So there's a few there. Now, Braxton Stancliffe's come out in 17th place overall. So he's now down at turn 8. And, oh, he's tried his best to stay within the track limit there.
Yeah, he's come out with about a 13, 14 second gap over Nathan Higginson, but he's the only really reference we've got in terms of who else is pitted. Yeah, we're seeing now as Dane and Tim Redmond kind of the lane. Let me just cycle back up to them to see where they're sitting. But they should be underway. They are both underway as of now.
Well, Braxton Stancliffe's coming around the final couple of corners now. So the real question's going to be, where does he come out relative to the people he was racing? They're at the pit exit right now. He's going to be ahead of Redmond, but he's not going to be ahead of Liccardo. So there's been a change there. Dane Liccardo gets the jump, and that's effectively an overcut for Liccardo.
That is. I'm not sure whether it's a short stop, whether he'd better manage his tyres throughout the safety car.
Could be fuel.
Or short filled the fuel. Yeah, very good strategy playing the pits there from the Liccardo Racing Team, and it sits him in. Well, I'd like to say provisional first, but we've got no idea exactly what the stop's going to do to Luke Rosella and Kurt Stenberg. And they never really got a chance to pass these guys, and they're now on fresh tyres, so they can maybe not do as fast at times, but they're now back to their optimum pace. That said, Dane Liccardo and Braxton Stancliffe about to start trying to race each other, which isn't going to help their lap pace much. No,
but that's also Braxton attacking because he's got 1 lap of tyres under his belt that have had a bit of heat into them, and they're up to temperature, up to pressure, and Liccardo's really got to get them up to temperature pretty quickly. And Stancliffe knows that he's got to basically strike while the iron is hot, as I like to call it. So these guys won't be provisional first, second and third. I've got a funny feeling that with the lap times that Rosella and Stenberg are doing at the moment, that they're going to usurp the lot of them as Stancliffe goes through at turn 1. Dane looks for the over and under, but Stancliffe was in the right spot at the right time there and headed off that over and under quite nicely. Now, Corey Mcfarlane leaving the lane as well. He'd been making some gains and actually has made a net gain overall on Ben Hall, to the point where he's come out right next door to the Bunnings Warehouse Mustang on the run down to turn 2, but decides not to go and try and execute the pass on the LMR numbered 20 there.
Yeah, that would have been pretty brave. He was on cold tyres, cold brakes, full fuel. The car wouldn't have liked stopping much. We saw that with Locky Burke on his shootout lap, not having warm enough brakes in the car. And that was with a lighter car. So smart move in the end. That was a very awkward run through the chicane. I don't think he got a track cut, but he definitely wasn't happy through there. That said, the tyres will now be warm after that chicane run, so we can have a bit of a crack now at the back of the number 20 Bunnings Warehouse Mustang.
You can indeed. Third retiree from this race, Nathan Higginson. Apparently lost a wheel, and I don't know, now there's only one way, Rhodey, you can lose a wheel in AMS. You and I both know what that is. Nathan Higginson, I'm sure, knows what that is. Do we dare say what it is?
I mean, there is a few ways. There's easy ways to do it in just plucking it out, launching over the backside of a curb or through a tyre barrier. I don't think the tyre barriers are physical around here, but you're definitely going to be trying to take a wheel off of a supercar in AMS.
I'm going to say 3 words. You hit something.
Yeah, right. Essentially. He's clobbered something of some sort. I'd imagine he's clapped the wall, and I'm guessing he's probably come off. He can correct us somewhere, maybe in the YouTube comments, so that everyone else can know about it after the chicane he's just said. Yeah, I imagine he's spat himself out of the chicane probably the wrong way. Maybe something a bit like I think it was a Craig Lowndes a few years back, something along the lines of that possibly. But
here we go, Rody. Here we go.
Oh,
sorry to cut you off. Kurt Stenberg in the pits. Bit unsurprising. He's come in at the end of lap 20. Locky Burke has come in at the end of lap 20 as well. So they were stopping under the safety car. So that's interesting that they haven't been able to go a little bit longer than I thought they probably could go.
The interesting point with this is Rosella still hasn't pitted yet. And it's maybe not a big surprise to those who've been watching some of the other Outworld broadcasting streams, because he's also been running in the GT3 Cup through the GT3 Series with Lewis Wedding and now Brendan Ross as a teammate, running the Porsches and doing I'll just say unfair things with the way he's managed to get a car and its tyres and fuel to last.
Alien things.
He's in the lane, but he's alien things, exactly. But he's in the lane, but he is a lap later than even Kurt Stenberg, who was running pretty happy pace-wise with. I mentioned earlier that Kurt likes a loose setup, so whether, Luke maybe a bit more of a strained setup has given him a bit more tyre life or something else, but it might not make a difference in this race, but it might make all the difference. We don't know yet. We've still got the best part of 30, 40 odd laps to know whether that's actually going to make a difference.
Yeah, you're right. And for Kurt Stenberg, he's actually come out here behind Liccardo and Redmond. He's actually made a gain time-wise as to how everything's panned out. So Liccardo and Redmond stopped a couple of laps before Stenberg. They went a couple of laps longer. He's actually been able to erode a bit more of that margin down to the point where he's pretty much right now on Redmond's rear bumper. Not quite under the rear wing yet, but under the rear bumper. Now, I've just noticed that Braxton Stancliffe has got a bit of smoke billowing from the back of that car. I'm wondering if he's hurt the engine somehow. He's been over-revving it or doing it quite aggressively on the downshifts, because that car does not look healthy, and I'm a bit worried this car's about to expire in the next few laps.
I think looking at the pace, I don't think he's hit something like... We have seen cars that have expired post-accident in that they've picked up damage which has impacted the cooling, and then only then after the incident, after he's just pulled off, I think. Gone straight on.
Yep, engine gone. That'll be engine gone for sure. Straight into retirement for Stancliffe. Now it's a local yellow down at turn 2. That's a shame as well. It's probably one of the best runs we've seen him for his very short career in ASR supercars. And he's going to have to look back on that one, I think, and work out where he did the damage, whether it's a cooling issue, some damage to the car that's caused it to overheat, whether he's overdone it on the downshifts or what's happened there. But a tough luck for the maiden front row sitter tonight.
Yeah, I've only seen it one other time. It was with Brenton Foley from damage through the old chicane at Calder in 2020 or 2019. I was going to mention the two race leaders being, when I was going to mention it, being the two Pixel Sim Sports cars. That said, the other...
they're pitting.
The point is, they're pitted at the same time, so they're going to double stack potentially as well.
Here we go.
They're going to side stack to each other.
Let's see how it's done, boys. Can they get it done? Lewis is trying.
A little bit, I think. No, he's going to have to get a little closer.
Yes, now he's got it. Now they've got it.
He's still going to make up some time over sitting behind Rossi, although he has still lost a little bit of it. But as we mentioned, as they've mentioned, second worst driver, second worst teams, they were running 1 and 2 there and managed to get the tyres to last the longest. Whether it actually means anything or whether it just means that they're playing tyre conservation games because they can. Last 2 cars from that lead group to pit, and I think everybody now has had at least one stop.
Yeah, correct. Everyone has had one stop The exception being Luke Rosella is the only one, I believe, that has not... Has he been in?
He came in 1 lap later than Kurt Stenberg. So he has been through the lane as well.
Okay, there you go. So my prediction was kind of right in that I thought Luke Rosella was going to jump out with a pretty handy advantage at the pointy end of the field after the first sequence of stops. And then the real interesting battle, as you can see it back there, you got Liccardo, Redmond and Stenberg. So that's the battle for the last two out of the three, last two steps on the rostrum as it sits right now. Will Devenish actually has recovered pretty well. Here goes Redmond down the inside of Liccardo at turn 1 on lap 24. Good move, job done.
100%. Now that was a good move. I was wondering how this was going to go. I mean, we're used to seeing Tim and Kurt battle each other. Dane's actually been around Kurt on track a few times. I think more in ASC than we've seen him over here. That said, I think he sidestepped the argument. No, actually not quite. He gave a little bit of panel rub there to Kurt. So just reminding him, he is there and he is actually willing to have a battle here. It's going to get a little busy here. I'm concerned for Tim based on the way I've seen Kurt launch through the chain behind other cars so far in this race, and he's nearly gotten to the back of him again. It's a missile through those curbs, that TTR number 47. I just want to quickly jump back to the live chat. I missed it earlier, but it's not the first motor we've seen go. Cam Rutley picked up damage early in this race and then eventually had his motor go off of contact as well. So that's the second motor we've seen blown, although I'd say for potentially different reasons so far tonight, but it's going to be a long night for a few teams' engine builders coming into the next round.
Definitely. Going to be a few long nights and a few workshops here at in ASR land. Of course, the next stop on the calendar is Winton, which we haven't raced since the 2020 season as well. So plenty of knowledge to go. There's actually been a couple of revisions to Winton, a few new signs, some new marshals posts have been put in, a couple of updated limits as well. So we're looking forward to another trip to Northern Victoria in 3 weeks' time. Actually, a fair bit of racing going on both in the real world and in sim racing world. There's a car that I just saw go a little bit deep at turn number 1, which was Ben Hall. Now coming back to Will Devenish here, Rhodey, he's found his way up into P5. Of course, he didn't set a lap in the shootout. He had the track violation. He was also caught up in the turn 1 lap 1 incident. He's done a pretty good recovery job so far.
Yeah, he's just watching through pretty healthily aggressive run through the chicane. No, he's had a pretty good recovery drive. He's not a stranger to shootout. It's not going his way, so he's had to run recovery drives like this before. And I don't want to say it's a thing, a characteristic of his driving, but his driving style does almost lean itself a bit to true recovery driving. He likes to set himself goals and then try and exceed those goals by about 5%. Which works best in a recovery drive where you're already under the pump as it is. And when he puts himself under the pressure, if he puts himself under too much pressure, he can find himself spun out or just off kilter. But that said, he's doing pretty well already. He's up 5 spots as a result of the safety car and the way that the pit's structured through, and obviously the pace he's been carrying. He's got a bit of a gap to the next car ahead of him, which is the back of the battle that we're seeing Tim Redmond, Kurt Stenberg and Dane Liccardo. He has also got Corey Mcfarlane playing up on the back of him, who I believe might have pitted later than Will, so he might be on fresher tyres. Also, Corey, just a younger driver, a bit more, I suppose, aggression, a bit more of a bee in the bonnet, as it were. So this is going to potentially be a battle that we're going to see form up the next few laps as Will's just working on the recovery drive and probably isn't too interested in a battle. And, Corey's, I'm not saying he doesn't have any long-term strategies, but at the same time, he'd maybe just be here for the fun. So interesting battle that potentially play out in a few laps' time.
Yeah, importantly too, Mcfarlane and Devenish have been lapping about the same sort of lap times. Their last times were a 21.4 each. They're both of them quicker than all three ahead of them. Redmond, Stenberg and Liccardo all about 3 or 4 tenths slower last time around. And it's been that way for the last 2 or 3 laps I've been noticing. On top of that, Locky Burke, who also was in the turn 1 lap 1 incident, is having a bit of a recovery drive. He was actually 3 tenths quicker last time around than Devenish and Mcfarlane. He was in at 21.1. So, again, these 3 that we've just been through, Devenish, Mcfarlane and Burke, keep an eye on them. They're going to come together at some point.
Yeah, I missed out on my can actually, but yeah, Locky Burke, I think even closer to the back of Mcfarlane than Mcfarlane is to Will. So these guys, pace-wise, two pretty similar. Burke is a bit quicker. They're going to probably start to concertina up a little bit based on pace and tyre wear. They said they're also cycling through some lap traffic here in Pete Thrower. He's actually managed to get himself back on the lead lap as a result of the pit train, but he's starting to cycle back through the leaders now. But great work to Pete. He has stuck with it. He has kept out there, despite the race maybe not going quite the way he wanted it to. And he looks to pick up some good points if he makes it to the end of this race.
Here is Pete Thrower now through the chicane and gets out of the way as quickly as he possibly can. Because don't want to get a track strike going through that chicane. Lets him go through, so good job there for him. He has actually fallen outside, to correct you there. He is he's 1 lap down. And the other man who's a lap down is Daniel Cox. Now, he went super, super, super long on the stop. I'm pretty confident here. And I'm almost pretty confident to say that, judging at the pace he's running, he's on a hard tyre.
Yeah, actually, it's a good point. He's comfortably a few seconds off of the lead pace. We're not seeing looking slow as a result. I'd say, yeah, he probably is betting on the hard tyre. And we haven't restricted a hard or a soft tyre to this race. We will have a 200k race later in the season that will be restricted to hard tyres. So even if the race doesn't go well for him, a bit of the Mcfarlane at
Rosella around ahead. What happened there? So Luke Rosella's had a little bit of a mistake off of turn 4, I think, there. And we'll go and have a look at that one on the Outworld Broadcasting replay. He had a really healthy margin, so he's not going to lose too much of that, but I think maybe he just got upset by the bump. No, on the curb, and he got the wall.
Ooh.
That's an odd one. That's not something I would have expecting to see on a replay from the defending series champion getting a little bit too close to a wall.
Like that's almost uncharacteristic. I mean, he's pushing hard, but he doesn't need to push too hard at this point. The lead he's got, it's not insurmountable, but it's pretty healthy. And I mean, the guy he's trying to lead away from is a good mate. So I'm not saying he's gonna roll over for him, but it's not like he's got someone say of the ferocity of say even one of his young proteges in Locky Burke. If Locky Burke got to the back of him, he'd give him a red hot go.
Oh, absolutely.
But, as I was leading into with Daniel Cox, potentially whether this race goes either way or not, maybe adopting a bit of the McLaren strategy from Imola after Ricardo got off strategy quite early with the contact on the first lap. They end up putting that car on a hard tyre to see what the viability was of the hard tyre to potentially then move Lando Norris to that tyre. While we're not playing that same sort of strategy here, it's not like Cox is a teammate that he's doing the testing for. He will have that up his bank. Corey Mcfarlane, the first to pick up a drive-through, and that'll probably be
track limits,
curb abuse somewhere.
Curb abuse. He was down at turn number 2 when that happened. We'll go and pick that one up and see what happened.
Would have got close to the apex then to pick up a track cut there.
Yeah, that's a really odd one. We'll actually pick him up on the replay here because that's a most unusual spot to pick that one up. And I think he's just been given another one as well for the chicane. So what did he do here? He's got the left-hand side tyres on the curb at turn 2. That will be enough to trigger that one. And then I think he got another one down here at the chicane. So he's been given a double whammy. And that'll take him out of what is currently 7th place. Let's have a look through the chicane. Did he get his line wrong? The answer is... I don't know.
I think he would have picked up on that. It would have been pretty marginal. He might have just been, Moz as a result of picking up the initial drive through. He just wasn't fully focused in the zone, probably having a little bit of a bark up or a blow up about getting that track cut. I mean, you do it to yourself, picking up the 3 or the 4 that get you to that point, but it's I've been on the receiving end of of 1 or 2 bark ups about giving people the final track cut, so I know how it gets into people's heads. No, as I was finishing and saying, Coxie, if nothing else, he's got some good markers to lead into for the forced hard tyre 200k round later in the season.
Yeah, he does. I'm just having a look at the calendar to see where that one is. It's actually the very last round of the season at Eastern Creek, where we have to go to that one, or Sydney Motorsport Park as it's now called these days, as Mcfarlane has served his penalty. Comes out of 7th place and has dropped all the way to 12th. Mugford's gone deep at turn number 1. And Mcfarlane's come out behind the 444 of Brendan Ross. Now, also just noticing as well too, Rhodey, that Dane Liccardo's lost touch with Stenberg and Redmond. So he's made a mistake somewhere. I went back to have a look to see if I could find it, but I couldn't see where it was, although his last lap was 1.8 seconds slower than the two of them ahead, but he's more than 1.8 seconds behind them on track. So he's made probably a couple of mistakes, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's possibly mistakes, it's possibly the tyre life getting into him. You know, as I mentioned, like he can be he's another driver that can be his own worst enemy at times. That said, he is now sitting. He already did have a bit of technical leaning on the CRE operation at the start of the season, but obviously now with official CRE backing on his car and official time with them, he'll be sitting in the chat with Will.
Oh, and he's had another moment. No, wall. He's done what Luke Rosella did, although only a little bit worse. So getting a little bit too greedy, trying to pick the throttle up a little bit early and trying to use as much of the track limits as he could, and got stung there as Burke gets really wild and out of control through the chicane behind them. And Devenish has now got missile guidance lock on the back of car 35 right now. Now we should allude back to the change of colours for Dane Liccardo. He was with ERT in the Hornets division for, I think, the better part of the last 12 months. So I'm not sure if it was exactly 12 months. I think it was a little bit less than that.
About I think somewhere in the region 6 to 8. It was around the time of Bathurst in the Euro Cup last year that he joined the team, and then he officially started running their colours sort of back end of last year, and then obviously with the full tilt this year in both Supercars and the GT3 series.
Yes, so unfortunately for Dane, they parted ways in the last couple of weeks. So there was a bit of a forced livery change for car 35. Just fortunate that Will Devenish and the crew have taken him under their wing. He's going to be sharing a pit boom. Actually, he was already sharing a pit boom with Brett Foley, so that won't change for him. He'll still be in that spot in pit lane, but just some different colours to look forward to. Personally, for me, Rhodey, I actually think this is possibly going to end up being a good thing for the young man. I think having been in that sort of environment, experienced what it's like to be a part of a big racing team in iRacing like ERT, probably is going to be a good thing for how he conducts himself moving forward. And now that he's sort of not got to worry about any of the stuff going on with ERT, he's going to be okay. As there's a big issue for Tim Redmond just in front. What's going on with Redmond?
I'd say that car looks like maybe tilting in punctured tyre, doesn't it?
Oh, that's really awkward. Right. Yeah, I think he's hit a wall. I'm going
to have a look back. I'd suggest he's done it through the chicane.
Oh, yeah, he has. Here we go. Here we go. We've got it on the replay. And, the car just whack. The car just veered hard left.
That's like that would IRL. You would have lost a corner of that car. So, yeah, that's a shame. Actually, talking about mechanical issues, just seeing in the Discord and in the live timing, we've lost Locky as well from this race. So, becoming, I said it was the Gold Coast of the Kiwi lands, but I didn't expect it to be quite as attritional as a Gold Coast race can be. But I think we're up to 5 or 6 cars out at this point, and a few more cars, obviously. Down for positions that they'd like to be with.
Oh, damage. To make matters worse, Termo's had a moment at the pit entry. So that one's not something that I would be expecting to see either. So for Termo, unfortunately, it's time for a little bit of a look at what happened here.
Oh,
he's had a moment going into. I think I'm not sure if this was a planned stop or not. What's he done here? He's clouded there.
It's such a benign. I think it's the same thing we saw from. I think it was Dane Liccardo.
Have a look at this. We'll go on board for this one so you can see what it is. So the entrance to the pit lane is actually quite unusual. You can see there. It's actually got a little bit of a kink in it, and it's hard to spot. And Termo just hasn't turned right.
No, it's one of those things where he probably thought from his cockpit he was clear, and it's the difference between feeling comfortable with a wall and walls you can kind of brush comfortably and get away with at race speed versus that wall where it's just at a very acute angle. It might just be a bit of funny collision mapping with that wall as well. That's meaning that it's catching cars, because the second car that's caught, it might be just picking up the wheel of the car, which depends on where the steering is, can hang outside the car. We obviously saw with Dane Liccardo in qualifying do the same thing. Also in the lane as well, we did see it pop up. Corey Mcfarlane now with his second drive-through, so starting at the point where with his drive-throughs where we don't recover much from them. That's it. He's just pulled the car into the lane.
Yeah, he's just pulled the pin. So he's had about 3 or 4 track infringements so far. So he's out of this one. So the rate of attrition is starting to take its toll on this field. That now makes 6 entries out of this race.
I'm gonna have to reset because I've within all that I'm losing track of where this race is going. It's just everything.
We all are.
Not in the way we like to see it happen.
Yeah, we all are. We're going to have a bit of a quick look through the field here just to see where the lay of the land is at the moment, because there's still at least another round of stops to go, and there are people dropping in to the pit lane at the moment. So Luke Rosella has the race lead, 12.2 seconds to the good. Kurt Stenberg P2. Then Will Devenish has found his way into P3 by virtue of Liccardo having some dramas. Looks like he's been through the lane as well.
Liccardo has just pitted, so that'll be why he's backing down.
So Will Devenish still got to stop again. Then Locky Burke, again yet to stop for the second time. Liccardo in the lane. There's Hans Brunswick P6, now becomes P5. Burko, Brendan Ross, Joe Mugford now in the 10, and NZ Snipes is 10th.
Yeah, and that's been a quiet run for Snipes as he runs very deep at the, actually wasn't letting the car through, that was the position. Ran very deep at ITM corner. I think it's the deepest we've seen a car go and still make that corner.
Yep, and then Lewis Wedding slipped through on the inside quite smartly.
Yeah, but it's been a good sort of quiet run for Snipes in the background. Qualifying maybe didn't quite go the way he wants it to. It still wasn't a bad show in qualifying, and he's kept out of a lot of the issues. And has run pretty clean. And yeah, he's with both of them passing Burko. He's in the effective top 10. So I think he has just opened the door very politely for his teammate and team boss in Team Redmond, who now sneaks up in the top 10. But still a very good run for Snipes.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was right down the bottom end of the field as well. Like I think he was like about 3rd or 4th last on the grid, which is not where he was expecting to be, or where he wanted to be, probably is more the correct way of saying it. And he's now found himself knocking on the door for a top 10 result. But albeit there's still some pit stop sequences to shake out. Steve Burko's just been through the lane. He was in 7th place. And keeping an eye, Locky Burke is now in for his next stop as well. So this is awkward, Rhodey. I'm looking at the lap counter here and thinking there might yet be another stop somewhere here, or people that are stopping now are going to have to take hard tyres.
36 laps, coming up to 60, with the tyres stops getting to about 15, 16. Actually, I think they're going to be less than that because the guys at the front end Supercars are pushing, obviously running fast, pushing more from the tyres than even some of the guys in Dev Series. Let's say 14 laps for the tyres. They're going to come up 10 laps short. So,
and here comes Stenberg out of 2nd place. So he's coming into the lane for his second stop.
I think even with the only other driver that I'm curious to know where they are on stops is Daniel Cox. He won't have to stop now. He doesn't have to. His stops are now going to be based on fuel. And the other question is, how much more use can you get from the hards? The hards are more than double the length of use than the softs. He might not have to stop for tyres ever again. He can adopt the Lightning McQueen strategy of, gas and no tyres. And he'll have to stop one more time, but it'll be a shorter stop than everyone else around him. So he might, somewhere in all this, pick up some spots. That said, if a safety car does come out again, and we're getting to the point of the race where I think we're already seeing it reach, some of the drivers starting to get a little bit sort of dopey, a little bit tired, a little bit lack of concentration with some of the little mistakes we've seen in pit lane. Dane Liccardo catching the wall out of the roundabout. I wouldn't be surprised if we see just a very, almost like a lazy safety car pop up in the back end of this race. And I'm not sure what it's going to do for strategy. I know for Daniel Cox that might not help him though, because that's probably going to force him to go back to a soft. That said, I don't know where he's at. But it's still very much a it's just a draw a rabbit out of a hat situation, I think, at the moment with who's going to end up where.
Yeah, a bit of a lottery at the moment because there's still a lot to play out with where everybody has come into the lane and stopped. So we know that Stenberg's had 2 stops. We know Rosella's been into the lane under green flag once, and also he's been in under safety car. Will Devenish has only been in under green flag. He's still got another stop to go, and he'll feed out behind Stenberg and probably ahead of Brendan Ross.
Yeah, so, another drive-through just popped up there for Cheese, who was running, I think he ended up getting up pretty well positionally. He's sitting 16, so he's a good recovery from where he started. Also benefiting from a clean running. That said, he's going to tour the lane and drop a spot or two here. He's currently battling with fellow Kiwi in Peter Thrower.
Actually, he's one lap down. He's one lap down, and Throwers and actually, they both.
You're right.
There's a lap difference between the two of them.
He's a lap up on Thrower.
Yeah.
So this is actually going to put him a little closer to Thrower, so they can get into having a bit more of a battle. But those two are the last two cars running in this race.
Rosella's actually just been into the lane, I've noticed now as well, Rhodey, and he's come out behind Hans Brunswick in third place. So Hans now is also yet to stop again for a second time, and so too is Will Devenish. So I don't think Hans will make this particularly difficult for Rosella, given he knows where the pace is at, and also the fact that Rosella's team principal. And there's the evidence.
Yeah. And it's like a responsible decision, but at the same time, he's your team boss. I think Hans is under a multi-year contract. I don't think he's at risk of losing his seat, but at the same time, you don't want to give your team boss a reason to tear up multi-year contracts, because that doesn't do you any good in the industry. But I think Hans is not far off stopping himself. Tyres are just getting a bit long in the tooth. He's getting to the point with the safety car as well, probably helping him. I think he's maybe trying to two-stop this race, because if he can hold out for another lap or two and then do the same in the third stint, he might just be good enough for that. And he hasn't can do it again, so Hans might be trying to two-stop this race.
But it needs to fall at the right time for him, and that's where the drama is right now. It's got to fall for him at the right time. So Rosella cycles back through to the lead of the race, and Kurt Stenberg will cycle back through into position number 2. Hans yet to stop. Currently, Will, as he's between the two of them, so until he stops, that'll be the way that goes. Will Devenish has just come into the lane, you just saw a few seconds ago, so that's out of position number 4, but he will cede that to Brendan Ross all but temporarily in the Pixel Sim Sports number 444. And Liccardo is the next man that I'm looking to see where he is on the track, and he's actually come out behind, or is he in front of Will Devenish? No, Devenish had
well in front of Will.
Yeah,
Will's dropping out, I think, 8 seconds behind. Dane's actually dealing with Locky Burke at the moment, who I think might be on fresher tyres. I'm not 100% sure on when they last pitted.
Off sequence, they're off sequence.
Got a bit more pace on board.
Yeah, they're off sequence at the moment, Liccardo and Burke. Now, they're just a couple of... we're actually coming up to the back chicane here. Now, Burke was off sequence. Liccardo's had his fair share of dramas too. Now, I think that these guys have both got to stop at least one more time. Burke, I don't think, can make it the way that he currently is at the moment, and Dane definitely can't. He's got, unless they get some safety car help. So Devenish will be set to pick up another spot or two here. Now, Redmond had an unscheduled stop a little bit earlier as well because of the damage from that incident hitting the wall on the exit of the chicane. So he's going to come out of what is P7 at some point. And then we're probably really only going to get a real indication here is there's another penalty for Cheese for what will be track limits. Looks like
that's nothing the chicane, actually. I think he's maybe picked up some damage through the chicane as well, because he's just pulled over and retired that car.
Yep, so that'll be another one out.
And
Rosella's had another moment at the same spot. He had one in the previous stint as well. Just keeping an eye on that. He's had a bit of a slide and whacked the wall on the exit of turn 4. So mistakes are starting to creep in the longer the race goes on. I was about to say, Roddy, we're probably really not going to get a true indication of how this whole thing is shaken out until about lap 50.
Yeah, there's a lot of different little micro strategies in play here. A couple of drivers that are running sort of B, C, D strategies based on how their race has gone, how other races are racing with other people. Even just simple things as nicking tyres here and there. I went back and had a look at Cheese. He got himself well out of shape on, I think, the second curb and ended up nosing into the tyre barrier. I think he ended up with a flat tyre and selectable the current at that point. Yeah, it's getting messy. Talking about just quickly, going to go back to the live chat. Braxton Stancliffe chiming in, mentioning that he was clearly hot in the collar after that engine failure. He punched the mini fridge when his motor went, and he reckons he might have damaged his knuckles, which is not the way to go about doing it. And Locky has also chimed in as well to mention that his mechanical thing was another engine failure. So as I said earlier, a lot of engines copping a lot of abuse today.
Yep. The engine, I think, is probably used a fair bit here, especially a lot of engine braking as well as Stenberg very wide in a package shot there as well. Now, Rosella and Stenberg coming up to lap. Termo in 13th, Burko in 12th, and Daniel Cox in 11th. So, actually, in fact, the Burko and Cox battle is actually quite willing and quite friendly at the moment, as Cox has just lost that spot to CRE Motorsport Mustang.
Yeah, it's a good little battle going on. Actually, looking at the field, there's another good little battle going on now. Locky Burke has managed to process through Dane Liccardo and is trying to get a run on Brendan Ross. They were thinking about going too wide through the chicane. I think the driver's briefing kicked into the back of at least Locky's brain, and he tried to get out of it, because that would have been death for at least 2 cars if they hadn't also caught Dane. That said, Burke is getting pretty keen to try and get Rossi out of the way. A little bit of a blink of the lights, even though I think Rossi's racing him pretty fairly. I think, I don't know, a bit of a pace differential that Burke thinks is in his favour, but he has now processed through, and actually that's moving down Liccardo now to the back as well. So a good little battle here for the best of the remaining spots outside of the podium.
Dane up the inside final corner here as well. He'd be on the wrong side for turn 1 though. Rossi, if he's close enough, actually got really good drive off that last corner. Liccardo following the wheel tracks. Will there be a send at turn 1? The answer is half-hearted look.
Yeah.
Actually worried him out of it at the end.
Yeah, that was all you need to do, is just put him there and have Rossi thinking where's he going to go, and you're right, that's all you need to do is just get into Rossi's head, and then that's a smart move. Rather than sending it down the inside, risking damage, risking a penalty, he's just sat in the mirrors and just spooked him.
Yeah, well, that's, I guess it's perceived pressure, that one is, Rody. Like, normally you're being put under pressure by somebody behind you, can feel it, but that one was more a case of he was there or thereabouts, he ducked and weaved a little bit, and then sort of half made like he was going to have a bit of a send down the inside at one, and then when he withdrew from the move, I don't think Rossi was expecting it. Locky Burke, he's been pinged at the chicane.
I saw it too. He was right up on 2 wheels and looked like he was cranked at a bit of a funny angle as well off of the second or the third curb. So that's, I think, one of the, it's definitely not the first person to pick up a track cut, but he's one of the prime cities, actually the second of the AAR cars to pick up excess track cut penalties in this race. First being Corey Mcfarlane, who chose to pull the car in.
Here it is on the replay. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, he lunched the second curb. Really, truly lunched it over that. He was all 4 wheels off the deck. So the steward's very much justified in issuing the penalty there. He's going to have to tour the lane, and that's sad because he's currently in 3rd place, and well, he had to stop anyway again because he wasn't going to make it from here. But that just makes it actually worse.
I will say, speaking of touring the lane, one of the question marks around strategy was Daniel Cox, who I've just seen come through the lane.
Yep, he's leaving right now.
I didn't catch the full length of the stop to know whether he'd done tyres or not, so he's potentially out there on second set of hards. But at the same stage, at this point of the race, he's probably almost within a window, depending on his tyre use, to maybe put a set of softs on to go to the end. Softs lasting, just under 1/3 of the race length. So we'll see where his pace comes out when he shuffles through. He's currently 15th. He's now second last car on the road. He's got 20 odd seconds to the next car in NZ Snipes. But if he's picked up tyres, better tyres on the cars around him, and I think either way he's good to go to the end from this point. So he's got best part of a minute up his sleeve on the cars ahead of him that have to pit for fuel or tyres or both. So could still be a sneaky good back-end result for Daniel Cox, just done by less conventional means.
Could very well be the case. Brendan Ross has got a bit of a battle on his hands here as well, but it's not because he's playing on something for position. Joe Mugford is trying to make some time here, because the next man up the road for him is Termo, and I mean, it's a fair effort for him to get past, but then Mugford's going to go through and try and get some time back on Termo, because I suspect he's actually got to stop again, Termo, as Rossi comes into the lane. Locky Burke's in to serve that drive-through penalty. So the last stop of the day for Brendan Ross, and here comes Lewis Wedding as well, I think, in the background. So the Pixel cars are pitting together yet again. Now, most important bit of information all day, Rody. Can the Pixel SimSport cars get it right the second time around? Wedding was a little bit short in the box last time, had to spend a bit of time ducking and weaving to try and make it. We're going to watch and see it happen. Or have they timed it to the point where Rossi departs as Wedding arrives? Let's have a look.
I think there'll be a small bit of overlap, and Lewis is planning for that.
Yep, that's better. Actually, it wasn't that bad when you look at it.
No, I didn't think the box was quite that long, but there's enough of the hitbox of the car within the hitbox of the pit box. It's almost like a 1.5 car long pit bay. But it's worked. I mean, technically, legally, if you're trying to put two sets of guys in side by side, you've worked that the best way because there's room for everyone to get to all the tyres. But no, they worked that out. It was a slight bit of lurching to try and get into the box far enough without getting in Rossi's way, but that's worked out. So both cars being serviced at the same time down the 50 Sports Garage, really pushing the limits on what's possible with the pit stop strategies. And Rossi's back out in 11th and Lewis is back out in 12th.
He certainly is, and Rossi's got plenty of clear track around him. In actual fact, there's plenty of clear track around a lot of drivers at the moment. The closest two cars on track are actually Mugford and Snipes that are in 13th and 14th. That's the closest two pair of cars on the track at the moment. Here they are just exiting turn 2 and up to turn 3. There's Mugford in the TriStar Racing ZB Commodore. Behind him is the Donut King Mustang of NZ Snipes. Now they, of course, are both one lap down on the field, but the field is pretty well strung out across the whole entire circuit at the moment. There really isn't a lot of battles going on. The one real thing we're trying to scratch our heads here is just work out who's yet to stop for the final time, when do they come in, and how does that affect the current race setup. The ones that I'm going to be interested most here, Rody, I'm going to cycle through these drivers right now. So Luke Rosella, I'm not 100% sure, but I think probably with a bit of fuel save, which he's not really doing, he's doing 20.6s, he might be okay to make it to the end. So too Kurt Stenberg. I think that they're probably going to be fairly close to making it to the end of the race overall. Dane Liccardo's got a question mark over him. I've got a funny feeling he might need to stop again. Behind him, Tim Redmond. He definitely has to stop again because he had that damage and then came in a little bit later again. So I think he's off sequence to everybody else. Almost positive that he has to stop again. And then the only other ones that I'm looking at in the list are possibly... Hans Brunswick's been in. He's gone a lap down. I don't think Burko or Termo or Brennan Ross or Lewis Wedding have to stop again. And Locky Burke's gone a lap down, so he's stopped for the final time. So realistically, I'm looking at the Liccardo, Redmond and Devenish group of cars. So the cars are in positions 3, 4 and 5 right now, because I think between them, that's going to work out how this last step on the podium is going to look like.
Yeah, they're all within margins where they're not racing each other, but they are close enough if something can happen one way or the other. Dane has a 5-second lead, nearly 6-second lead over Tim Redmond. He's putting in some very, very clean, very consistent laps. He might lose a little bit of time as the race ticks over, but again, he's got a very good position in mind, a very good position on the track, and I think he's keeping that in mind with how he approaches the back end of this race. Tim Redmond's, recovering from the little spill earlier, so he'll be pushing fairly hard. He's got, as I mentioned, 5-6 seconds to make up. The gap from him then back to Will is in the region of 4 seconds. Will's just had to process through Joe Mugford, who, as we mentioned, is having his own little battle trying to catch Lewis Wedding. And from memory, looking at that battle earlier, there was only 4 or 5 seconds maybe within that. So
it's 5.3 at the moment between the two of them.
So that's a little battle that might populate out a little later for not quite the back of the top 10 actually, where the way things are shuffled out, but it's getting there. Actually, speaking of battles, we've actually got one on track. We've got Ben Hall and Locky Burke over 9th and 10th.
Yeah, so they have actually now come together because Burke had obviously served his drive-through penalty and then been in for his stop for the final time. Ben Hall has actually just exited pit lane for the final time, so he's good to the flag here. Probably going to have the best tyres of the lot of all the drivers for the moment, but he's got to use them right now. He's got to basically burn up this rubber really, really quickly, because Burke's going to have him down the inside here in 11, and he sticks his nose up the inside, forces Hall to bail out of that one, and that's a really good authoritative move from Burke, who's having to basically damage limit this drive here after the drive-through penalty, but he saw his opportunity, stuck his nose at the inside at 11, and it was a fairly easy move in the end, and Hall had no answer.
Yep, and we just in the background of that, we saw one of our question marks around the back end of this race start falling into place. Dan Licato's coming in for his final stop, so I'd imagine jumping onto a soft set of tyres, probably brimming the tanks, or maybe not quite brimming the tanks, but putting what's left of the fuel. We've seen that he did seem, at least in the first stint, to work his fuel out to what he actually need rather than just brimming the tanks. So possibly another short stop for Dan Licato, which could turn out to be quite beneficial for him. Tim Redmond has gone through, Will Devenish has gone through. Hans Brunswick will probably be the next car to go through, and then from there he'll drop in behind Hans Brunswick. As Tomo's another 25, 30 seconds odd back, and he is now underway now. So there goes Hans Brunswick past the pit lane, and actually in the pit lane as well, we've got Pete Thrower, who'll be in for hopefully his final stop. He is a few laps off the pace, but he's still running, so as I mentioned, he'll get some good points for finishing this race. And yeah, now we're waiting to see what Tim Redmond and Will Devenish are up to.
So Redmond's now coming down to ITM corner at the moment. And what have we got left on the clock here? We've got 11 laps at the end of this one. We're on race leader's on lap 49. And Redmond's 50 seconds off the race lead. Stenberg comfortably in second. He's got a huge margin over these guys. But yes, the real question's going to be, nope, here we go. Redmond in, so I was right. Redmond had to stop again. So that answers another question. Will Devenish goes through into position number 3. Now the real question for Wilbur is, does he have to stop again? When was his last stop? Let's see if we can get this up on the details here. So be ASR, if you're following along at home, ladies and gentlemen, asrleague.liveraces.com is the website you need to visit. It gives us all the timing we need, all the timing trees and everything. And while I'm doing that, Rody, what do you got your eyes on?
I'm just looking through another pitter there. Kurt Stenberg in for his final stop. So we're not really focusing on the lead two cars because they're sort of checked in their own postcodes respectively. Luke Rosella still continuing around. He's probably got one more stop, if that, underneath him. Actually, that's what I think we might have seen him stop earlier, to be fair, so he might be good to go. Either way, unless he makes a mistake, we catch a very late safety car in this race, which, I mean, it might throw a few of the races under the bus, but it'd be good for content. He's going to take a pretty comfortable win here. Kurt Stenberg, again, going to be pretty comfortably in second. The next car for him to work with would be Will Devenish, but he's just coming up to him now. And Will Devenish, as we believe, still has to stop. So Will's going to cycle up to second here for all of essentially the length of his remaining length of this stint for him.
Well, this is an interesting point here, Rody. Sorry to cut you off. Will Devenish last stopped at the end of lap 39. So he would have to go 20 laps on this final stint to make it work. So it's possible. The math we were looking at a bit earlier in the day was suggesting fuel-wise, yes, you can do it. You can do a 20-lap fuel run without a problem. It's the tyres that are the concern. If he's got the soft tyres on board, there's a huge question mark over their longevity. But if he's got the hard tyre on board, this could be a bit of a masterstroke.
It depends. Like the pace drop off for a hard tyre it would still get a podium. The pace drop off for the hard tyre is not going to be enough to deal with Kurt Stenberg over the next 9 laps. And I feel Will knows his way around strategy, but I still feel at the end of this race, having Kurt Stenberg right there to play with, I don't think he's going to let him wander past unless he's, locked in bullet tight to his strategy. If he's on the softs and he gets brought into the fight here, it's going to risk a puncture or just running it wide somewhere where the tyres start to go off. But I didn't actually factor. I factored. We're sort of factoring Will into the podium. I didn't factor Will quite this far into the podium. So he's 58 seconds behind, 59 seconds now behind Luke Rosella. As I said, he's got that pretty comfortably. With a pit stop, he's still going to think be ahead. But yeah, now that gap of 5 seconds to Kurt Stenberg is an interesting point. And then the other question as well, actually looking back, be interested to know when Hans Brunswick last stopped, because if he has to come through the lane again, then he's going to drop a few spots. Otherwise, he's looking pretty good for a top 5. Actually, speaking of the battles as well, I've just flicked back as well. Tim Redmond has caught Dane Liccardo, so this is going to be a battle for the remaining step in the top 5. I think Dane does have slightly fresher tyres, but we've seen at various points in this race Tim Redmond having the better pace. So this will be a good little battle as well. Dane's got the tyres underneath him, where I think he could actually fight for this one. And I hope at this stage of the race he does. I hope the same way he does it responsibly. He doesn't fight for it in a point where he's going to risk killing the car or losing the position and a bit more. But yeah, it's actually starting to come back to us all at the back of this race.
It certainly is. And just having a look at the answers to your questions before. So Hans Brunswick last stopped on lap 41, as we're looking at a battle here of who wants to play chicken into the chicane, and Liccardo lets Redmond go. And Luke Rosella actually stopped last on lap 37, so he was 2 laps earlier than Will Devenish. So, I mean, math would suggest that he's not going to be able to make it, but he'd have to do a 22-lap run on fuel, and Brunswick might be good to the end. Oh, they've both gone wide. They've both gone deep, Liccardo and Redmond, in this battle for the last stop inside the top 5.
Yeah, no, I was just looking up the order. Luke's still putting in lap times suggested on softs. He got them to the last 20 odd laps in the first, somewhat in the first stint, but there was a safety car helping that somewhat. So I think he's running questionably. But that said, we've seen him in GT3. I wouldn't put it past him. If he's still, not having to stop, then that's a pretty good run. I think at this point he's lapped all but the top 4. So pretty monumental run for Luke Rosella if that's the case, and then to get the softs last. But if he does have to pit, then potentially a top 3 race here, right at the death, which would be quite nice.
Well, speaking of the top 3, the last 2 inside the top 3 are about to go toe-to-toe for the last remaining 7 laps of this race. Well, they're going toe-to-toe right now. It might be a fait accompli here. Stenberg looks for the over-under. Devenish parks it right on the apex of turn 1. The next opportunity is down here at 2. Devenish moves it over on the run to the hairpin, and at the end of the day, he knows the gig's up. Just made it as difficult as he could make it without losing too much time. But let Stenberg go at the end of the day. Now, the important thing, coming back to your question before about whether Hans Brunswick needed to stop again here, Rody, as we see, the race leader is actually in the lane. Luke Rosella is in the lane. Hans Brunswick has actually unlapped himself, and on track, he's actually on the run to turn number 2 right now. But he's on, it's lap 53 for him as well. So Will Devenish has no choice here. If he wants a podium, he has to make this fuel tank and this car last right till the very end. He's got the time in hand over Brunswick. He cannot afford to stop.
No, I was just looking through everything sitting, and part of the thing that probably weighed into Will, again, maybe Ridge's focus on the strategy was just it, but as he came up to pass him, Kurt did the fast lap of the race. I think it was a 19.9, which is bloody quick. And I'm not sure whether Luke, with his strategy, needed to come in this early, or whether he's doing a bit of an F1 strat. Not that it really matters in this point, it's just bragging rights, but I did see him put new tyres on the car. He's got 5 laps left. I would imagine he's running, if he had to top up the tank, it would be very little. I imagine he's probably put the car into a qualifying trim, and he's going to have a crack at the lap record, considering that he's already got a pretty handy lead regardless.
Well, considering that he's done a 19.9, the track record for race trim was a 20.6. So that's been pretty much blown out of the water to a bird. So both.
It has. It's just Luke going for the record, because Kurt currently holds it. Kurt set the best lap. I think it was the last lap through, or the lap before, with a 19.9. So Luke's going to put a bit more.
Standing with a little bit leery. I just noticed through the through turn number 8, but that's not going to worry him too much. But you're right. The funny part here is, you want to know the two fastest lap times of the race and who's got them?
I think the fastest would be Kurt Stenberg at the moment.
Correct. And then the second fastest?
It has to be Luke Rosella, surely.
Correct. Do you want to know what the separation margin is?
It's going to be pretty close, because we mentioned them both doing 19.9s.
No, 1/10 of 1 second is what it is right now.
Cool. Yeah. So it's definitely achievable.
19.908 for Kurt Stenberg and 20.008 for Luke Rosella. It is precisely 1/10 of 1 second.
Yeah, and that'll all come down to how much you want to run through the chicane. Another question as well for Luke, if he's going to have a stab at this, is how many track cuts does he have in reserve? I think with the race he's been running, he's probably been able to bank them up a little bit, not necessarily for this use, but just to have them in case he needed them. So, not that he obviously use the track cuts at a lap time, but he can maybe be a bit more loose with that with the chicane on the back straight now if he is going to have a crack at trying to beat the race lap record.
Well, the funny part of it is he's actually only got 3 that he's burned throughout the whole entire race. Now, the limits were lifted for the 200k race as well because of the nature of the track. Drivers were actually given 7 before they were on their final warning, so we can reveal that now for the crew watching along in the live chat. That's how many they were set to. So if you'd been taking liberties and you'd already racked up 7, the drivers have got drive-through penalties and really sort of abused the limits a little bit too much. Now, importantly for Luke Rosella, he's got a little bit of draft assistance here. Locky Burke's just giving him a little bit of a tow along here. Here he goes, 19.616. So you're spot on the money there, Rhodey, with Luke Rosella trying to get the lap record.
And he's pretty healthily pantsed the time that Kurt set there. So a bit of a time in reserve in what Luke was running, again, just running to a number of some sort. Still doing it very quickly, obviously, in the early parts of this race, but now he's able to take the restrictors off that car, and 19.6 around here is getting very, very quick. So I don't think we're going to see necessarily a response from Kurt Stenberg. He might have the tyres on him, but we would have chewed through a little bit of it, catching and passing little Devenish, and Kurt's not in the same position of having as much of a buffer as Locky Burke. No. Another track cut. I was on board with him as he did it. Very awkward through the chicane, so that's going to drop him outside the top 10.
He's going to lose several spots in this. So got him on the screen right now. There he is. So he's 8th at the moment. Behind him, he's got Ben Hall in 9th, Lewis Wedding in 10th. Steve Burko might be a bit too far back to take advantage of it, but it's definitely going to elevate Hall into 8th and Wedding into 9th. And he should be coming through, I'd say, to serve that. He probably needs to get that over and done with
he's
soon.
He's doing that now.
Yeah, because the drama was going to be if he went, you need to serve it within 3 laps, and he's not within 3 laps of the finish here.
Another thing as well is that you don't want to risk it this late in the race if you're a lap down and you're not quite sure if you're counting laps properly or whatnot. You'd hate to think you have another lap left to go and planning on serving it with a lap left to go or whatever, and then you find it's the last lap and then you get the 30 seconds thrown at you, because depending on where he's at positionally, that can hurt more than the actual drive-through.
Spot on. We've seen it a few times as well, where if you get it right toward the end of the race, you can serve it within 3 laps and go from there. In actual fact, Burko has been able to take advantage here. He's gone through to P10. So
actually, Joe Mugford's going to come out pretty much alongside him as well. So
Mugford's got him. Mugford's cleared him quite comfortably as well. So that's a big loss for Locky Burke. He's lost about 3 or 4 spots in that one, all up.
He still has some pace on board, and I reckon he can probably catch Mugford. He might struggle to catch Burke on the time that's left. I reckon he can probably make a bit of a race out of Mugford. That said, Mugford's we don't know, to be fair, but Mugford probably got track cuts in reserve if they start having a battle where, well, we know pretty clearly, everybody knows at this point that Burke has done in reserve. So potentially a good little battle there. I do want to cycle up to the field just quickly, because I did see a little battle that was starting to form, and I think it is still, actually no, it's spread out again. But at one point there, we had Tim Redmond starting to pull away from Dane Leccardo, still within range for Dane. And a little further back from Dane was Brendan Ross, but they did just all have to cycle through Daniel Cox, and I suspect they got a little split as a result. Either that or different strategies going different ways. Ross and Lewis, we saw, were in fairly early. Tim in probably about the middle of the 3, and Dane in the latest of the 3, but not quite as quick as Tim. So I think that's why we're seeing the battle start to split out again as the tyre life starts to kick in for Brendan Ross, and just the pace kicks in Redmond.
Yeah, actually, Brendan Ross is just ahead of Luke Rosella at the moment. He's going into turn 8 for the penultimate time, and you're right, they're also now in the process of getting past Daniel Cox in the lap traffic as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned penultimate lap, meaning we've got just over 1 lap left in this race. Luke Rosella pretty comfortably at this point, 18 seconds. I don't see anything much happening to that at this point, although the Fat Lady has not yet started singing. Kurt Stenberg is going to come home, or will come home another lap or so, pretty comfortably in 2nd, but obviously still a lap to go. And that battle has more or less been decided. Hans Brunswick hasn't needed to pit again, but maybe just didn't have the pace necessary. And so far, Will's still got the car running, and he's 11 seconds behind Kurt, but he is on the podium.
He is indeed. So he's only got one more lap to go here, Will, and I think there'll probably be a little bit of clutching and lifting and coasting if the car's got not too much fuel left to go. But time in hand for him is a plenty. He's got, better part of a half a lap on Hans Brunswick right now. So should be a comfortable run to the flag for Will. For Luke Rosella, on his way to the chicane for the final time. Well, what can we say? Side of his first win 2 years ago in ASR Supercars. He clean swept the wins at the first round at Albert Park. Missed the last round at Symmons Plains. He was actually in Melbourne for the Grand Prix. And he is returned with a bang and pretty much showing them all how it's done here. And needed a good solid win to get himself back up the point standings. Of course, the drop round still to come into effect at round 8. But masterful drive, despite not being able to be on the pole with the shootout lap. He shows them how it's done over the course of 200 kilometres and is home in a canter here at Hamilton.
Yeah, pretty dominant performance in the end for Luke Rosella. Just getting the car and the tyres and the fuel to all work for him. Recovering pretty well from the early part of that race, and then just set sail and was more or less untouchable. Finishing second as he crossed the line just then is Kurt Stenberg. Ben Hall actually missing the brakes a little bit there on the run of the line, but he's finished the race as well. So Kurt Stenberg in second. Pretty good run for Kurt again, coming up through the back after the early incidents in that race, getting tangled with Corey Mcfarlane. And then Will Devenish comes home third. Good recovery from Will coming from the back into the top 10. Not so much caught up in the incidents, but just getting the car to work for him in the end. He's managed to do it. So pretty healthy return to form for Will Devenish.
And this is the tick box for me here, Rhodey. Best result ever in ASR Supercars in a short time for Hans Brunswick outside of the ASR Enduro Cup, where they were in the top 3 at the end of that one. But as a solo driver, he'll be pretty pleased with that one, considering the incident he was involved in at the very beginning of this race, right at this very part of the track, along with Locky, Burke, Will Devenish and one or two others. He'll be pretty pleased to recover up the field after that one, especially considering he was at the tail end of the field at one point for Hans. So that's a very, very good result for him, considering the other two AAR cars have sort of fallen by the wayside a little bit.
Yeah, going down the list from there, Tim Redmond in 5th. Good recovery in the end. Maybe not quite where he wanted to be. He had a good pace, but certain parts of the race not playing out his way. 6th going to Dane Liccardo. Not quite maybe the best he could have been, but he's been knocking himself all year that he hasn't quite had the pace. He hasn't been quite where he wanted to be. I can't remember exactly what the bet was, but we had a pretty healthy bet with some pretty good wager on it of what would happen if Dane got a top 10, and he was surprised that I was, without a doubt confident he'd get one this year, and all it took was him doing one race in the car I painted for him. So
there we go.
Hopefully the livery is a good form, a good knocker for him. But 6th for Dane Liccardo, that's going to bring his spirits up. Brendan Ross in 7th for the ASR's second worst Supercars driver, with Ben Hall in 8th. Good run in the end, quiet run for Ben Hall, but kept the car clean and got it home inside the top 10. Lewis Wedding in 9th, and again a good run, another top 10, another dual top 10 for the Pixel Sim Sports cars, so King's points are going to keep running away for them. And rounding out the top 10 is Steve Burko. Bit of a surprise actually in all that, to be the second best of the CRE cars.
Yeah, good result for Burko there. That's another tick box for me as well. Stayed as much out of trouble as he possibly could and has reaped the rewards of a top 10 finish, actually up 5 spots overall. So I'm very impressed to see that one there. You were right about the two Pixel cars being inside the top 10, because the other car that Will Devenish is paired with, who's just in there behind Burko, is actually Termo this year. So Termo finished out in 13th place. So there is a bit of a championship in terms of teams points that needs to be looked at as well when we get to that. We actually haven't had a chance to look at how the team standings were positioned coming into the night. We actually ran out of time. We'll actually bring them up now. So this is how they actually stood before they came into tonight. You can see there the difference between CRE Race Engineering, which is Termo and Will Devenish, and then Pixel Sim Sports in Wedding and Ross was not a huge margin, so that will come down, Rhodey.
Yeah, it will, yeah. Just the team standings they sit, although it might be updated as I'm going through putting the points in. I believe they are actually, they'll be updated now. But no, the gap will close down. Pixel Sim Sports having come on strong a little bit, and especially for Termo, it was a boogie track for him. He was actually running pretty well at points in that race, but it just ended up not panning out the way he wanted it to go. That's going to hurt them. That's going to put them on the back foot, and I suspect we're going to see Pixel Sim Sports jump to the front in the team standings. Probably see a bit of reshuffle at the back end of that as well with some of the other drivers, depending how all this pans out. But starting to see drivers filter up now into the interview queue.
Yeah, they're coming up to have a chat to us while we were actually bringing up the team standings prior to the night there. We won't have, unfortunately, have an update for you before the end of the night, how everything goes there. But with thanks to Beyond Electrical, we go to the podium presentations. And it's quite funny, Rhodey. The three men who were up the front of most of last year's championship have appeared here, despite the fact that they started at different ends of the top 10.
100%, yeah.
Who do we start with?
I think I've started to Luke first. I'm just curious on how he managed to get the car to last.
All right, well, let's go that far. You can have the honours then.
Alrighty, Luke Rosella. You had your first ASR Supercars race win here 2 years ago, and you backed up again with a race win here tonight in an equal length 200k race. How did you do it?
Just wheeled the thing around, I guess, for 59 laps, ready. This track I thoroughly enjoy. It's been pretty nice to me. I've only been there once before, and I got my first win here. So, I want to thank Cole for giving me the best car. It was fantastic. He also had a big part in the strategy, but unfortunately he couldn't race for he had other commitments. But it was just a fantastic race. A bit disappointed about the shootout though, but it was pretty busy all night.
Yeah, I was going to lean into that next. Evidently, the shootout not going the way you want it to go. Did it play in your head much on how it's going to affect the race strategy, or was it just flicking into an option B or an option 2 that you had to go with, and it was just a carry on with it?
With the shootout, I thought about option B, which is to try eke out a 2-stop, but even before this shootout, we were sort of umming and ahhing about the 2-stop with the safety cars. So it was all about just pushing as hard as you could, really, with the 3-stop on the softs. It worked out. I think we had a pretty good pace advantage anyway to sort of maximise the 2-stop. The 3-stop. Sorry. But you saw guys down the field, get a pretty big gain anyway. Trying the 2-stop with Hans, and I think Will tried it as well. I don't know, but the 3-stop that definitely worked with our pace, with even Kurt as well.
Yeah, I suppose talking from a wider point, obviously you're a driver for Synergy Sim Racing, but you're also a team boss for the AAR Mustangs. Just as a broad question, just how do you feel your cars went tonight?
Hans did a good job. He had a pretty big task in the final set to make the tyres last. Locky was also he's had good pace all week, and he was on for a really good result, but unfortunately got a drive through, which is pretty easy to do here. And I think Corey fenced it, which I'm not really surprised. He was also pretty pacey as always tonight. But as a whole, the team did really well, and I guess I did pretty well too.
Yeah. So next move from here is Winton. What's your thoughts on the place?
I absolutely hate it. It's the most overhyped racetrack in Australia, in my opinion. I know you would disagree with that, Rhodey, because I think you've driven there in real life.
I have, yes.
I'm not a big fan of it. Never driven there in AMS actually before. I've only driven it in iRacing, the new track on there. So it'd be interesting to do some setup work there, but we'll see how we go there.
Alrighty, well, great work tonight, Luke. I think you've almost done all that you could do. The only thing that eluded you there was the shootout, but still, very good run, and it sets up pretty well for the rest of the season. And we'll catch you in a few weeks' time.
Thanks, Reddy.
Alrighty, moving on now to Kurt Stenberg, starting from one of the only drivers that actually managed to get a shootout lap in, and as I said in the shootout, the only one of the drivers that managed to get through the chicane fast and survive. Out of interest, how many laps of practice do you have to put in to get that chicane sorted out?
I'll be honest, I didn't put in too many laps of practice, but pretty much all my practice here, like I'd raced here before, pretty much all my practice here was about getting the chicane right, because the rest of the track is pretty much unchanged from last time we raced here. But yeah, so didn't put too much in, but a lot of focus was on that chicane and making sure where the track cuts are, how you can maximize it to not get a cut.
And that obviously worked out pretty well for you in qualifying. Ended up with the pole. Not a bad start to the race, but then things got a bit busy. Ended up with tangled up with Corey Mcfarlane. And sort of what did that do for you strategy wise?
Yeah, well, I had double punctured rears, so after they got spun around by Corey, so I had no choice but to pit. But yeah, I don't know what was going on at the start there. I was going to go hard with people and try and get past, but then other two people around me wanted to play silly games, especially the one that passed me a few times. So, but yeah, and then we pitted, and then I decided pit again, get as much fuel into it. We're going to be at the back anyway, and then play it from there. I didn't know what to do on strategy. I was listening more to Luke, and at that point, I was kind of thinking we need to just do 3 stops. And at that point, I went push on and see what happens, maximize the length of the tyre runs, and see where we end up. I was hoping we'd be able to stay with Luke a bit more, but ultimately he was much faster than us tonight. We had nothing for him, especially in the first part of the lap. So yeah, it was just hang on and try and make sure that nobody played a strategy that was gonna impact us getting second for the rest of the race after we've got past everyone in the first stint.
Yeah, and in the end, then I imagine it was you weren't really feeling under any threat at any point by Will doing the 2-stop and sort of undercutting you coming into the final stint.
I was definitely aware of it and I was paying attention to it, but coming into the second last stint, I saw how far how far behind him he was, and I went, I should be able to get that gap on new tyres, so it shouldn't be too much of a threat. But I was definitely something I was keeping a note of because I knew that Will was trying something different. I could just tell.
All right. Well, still a good run. Obviously, not quite as quick as Luke, but second best is still plenty of points. As I've said with Luke, obviously next round in a couple of weeks is Winton. Where do you stand on the place?
It's my least favourite track in Australian motor racing by a mile. I despise the place, and every time I've raced there in AMS, I've done terribly. So look out for that one. Yeah, it's better in iRacing, but I don't like the place at all. It's not a fan favourite of mine, but you know, it's a racetrack. They're like all the others. They've got corners, they've got straights. You got to maximise, and we're gonna see how we go.
100%, mate. Well, we feel like we catch you again, but good luck, good work tonight, and good luck for next round.
Thank you.
And finally, moving to Will Devenish, the first of the drivers to run a 2-stop strategy. Will, was that the plan from the outset, or did that come in as a result of the safety car?
It sort of just happened towards the end of the race. So I had my stop under the safety car, then I had a stop after that, and the tyres after that second stop really lasted a bit longer than I anticipated. So I think I got another 2 or 3 laps out of them than I was getting out of any other stint. So it fed into allowing a hard tyre to work to get home. So yeah, took the gamble, paid off pretty well. On the hards, I was sort of maintaining a good gap with everyone behind me. So yeah, pretty happy with that result.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm surprised hearing that you're on hards. We saw a couple of guys play with hards at points in that race. I think Coxie was one of them. But surprised you're on hards because your pace was not a sufficient fall off, and that's exactly what you're saying. Is you're still on to hold the pace pretty well on the hard tyres. Yeah, aside of that, how do you think the race went?
Yeah, it was a bit scrappy early on, but that's to be expected around here. A bit disappointed that we've lost 2 cars during the race, but we also had 4 cars finish, so or 4 or 5 cars finish, so pretty happy with that actually.
Yeah, actually, I was going to lean into that actually as the other team boss in the interview queue. Just quickly, how's your thoughts on how the rest of the team went?
Yeah, like unfortunately, this is the second time we've run this race, and the second time Cam's been able to not finish it. We also lost Lock through it, but everyone else did really well, hanging on by the skin of their teeth most of the race. And hats off to Dane, real mature race for first time out in our outfit. So yeah, can't complain with how the team went tonight.
Awesome. And finally, I think we might get a bit of a theme going here, but your thoughts on Winton?
Oh, it's a brilliant track. Absolutely brilliant. Well, funny enough, it's probably it's sort of a home track. But yeah, I have no real strong feelings for or against it. We haven't raced there for a while, and I wasn't hugely competitive back then either. So we'll see what happens next round.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to memory with you and Winton was your ATCC win, but you haven't got something quite with the handling capabilities of the with the supercar. So still though, should be a good race. Great work tonight, Will, and as with others, we'll catch you in a few weeks' time.
Thank you.
And that's been our podium.
Thank you, Rody. And actually, I just want to say very quickly a big thank you for taking the podium interviews there, because from my point of view, I've not been well the last couple of weeks, and there is a little bit of all sorts of funny things going around at the moment. No, I didn't get a winning ticket in the COVID lottery, nor do I want one. I've ended up with what's called a rhinovirus, and I thought I'd gotten rid of it, and then it's resurfaced in the last couple of days and comes with quite a nasty cough that goes along with it. So a lot of times tonight I've been hitting the mute button, having a good old cough, and then getting back to normal again. It's hard for me too, because over the next 2 weeks it's probably some of the busiest 2 weeks for myself. GT3 broadcast next week from Portland International Raceway, going to be a sprint round there, and then the week after that it's the start of a really busy period, because we've got Victorian State Circuit Racing Championship at Phillip Island. That's on the 14th and 15th of May. And then immediately in the week after that, there's another round of GT3 on the Tuesday and another round of the Supercars on the Friday, which is the one we've been talking about with Winton. So my voice is going to get a severe working over in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and I've got to do my best to look after it. Very quickly, I guess to wrap this one up, Rody. So it's funny how the usual 3 protagonists have ended up on the podium, or the drivers that have ended up with the most sort of wins and podiums over the last 2 or 3 years have found their way up to the pointy end again. There were definitely some really good drives in there, especially the one we highlighted the most. There was probably Hans Brunswick and Steve Burke. It had some really good results. Probably not the showing that the Kiwis wanted to have on home soil. 2 retirements, and one of those retirements probably would have been set probably for a maiden top 5 finish in Braxton Stancliffe had he managed to be able to keep it going. We didn't see the incident that actually unfortunately brought out why the car died with the engine, but I think a few people will be going back, taking a look at that one, and maybe taking a bit of a learning experience from that one.
I'm curious if I get the chance to sit down and have a dig through the replay. I'm curious to know what happened. I suspect to be a similar thing, as I mentioned, with Brenton Foley at Calder Park a few years back, where the damage wasn't enough to kill the car initially. I think one of 3 PBF cars that met the tyre barriers back when the tyre barriers were solid at Calder. He was one of the 3 cars that didn't die immediately, but damage and then idling the car in the pit bay as the damage was getting repaired actually expired the engine. Or basically, temp damage to the point where it would expire. I suspect a similar thing has happened for Braxton in that one, and it could just be as simple as an innocuous little knocks that's just hit the hitbox in the right way that's picked up cooling damage, and having been on the sideline when that happened for Foley a couple of years ago, that sucks, especially in the position he was running. He was having a really strong night. He benefited from having a quick but clean, shootout session. He was running very hard, but still running competitively in the first couple laps of that race. Sort of benefited from the whoopsie that happened behind him between Mcfarlane and Stenberg, and outside the safety car, was sitting pretty comfortably up there in the front. Maybe wouldn't have held on in the end, especially with the pace of Rosella coming back through, and maybe even Kurt and Will. But definitely had a top 5 in his sights, and then just had it snuffed out. So I definitely think the 5's been let under him. Like, he knows at this point he's got genuine pace as long as he commits like he has tonight. I'd imagine he will have for tonight, being a home race, being something that has actually been shown to a wider audience than you might otherwise have been seeing it. So to those guys, if they do make it through to this point of the night, thanks for coming along and supporting Braxton and Stancliffe. I'm sure he appreciates it greatly. And yeah, he's going to have some good pace coming in the next few rounds. And another driver who's mentioned, and I've been getting DMs about him as well, is Dane Liccardo, who's, this is probably, straw breaks comes back for him, but in a good way, where, he's had a, very topsy-turvy last couple of months, as we mentioned, with sort of the team situations he's been in. He's now got a chance to just focus on himself and to just, be outside of a sphere of potential negative influence and just, work with the people he chooses to work with, being an independent driver such as he is. And coming out of this with a top 10 finish and, evidential pace that he could have gone maybe a little higher if the strategy or whatnot played out his way, I think it's going to set him up really well for the rest of the season as well.
Yeah, I tend to agree. You put Liccardo up there as well. What we've seen from him over the opening couple of rounds has been a little bit, I wouldn't say odd, but it's not been probably some of his finest moments. But for him to come into tonight's round with the ERT piece of the puzzle gone, and under, I guess, the umbrella now of the CRE stable, I think he probably knew that to deliver a P6 result, I think for him, he'll be smiling from ear to ear about that one.
Absolutely, yeah. I think he'd be very much on board with that, and I'll do a swing in by and have a chat to him after we're done tonight. But no, that was overall for a race. That was pretty good. I alluded to right at the start of the night, and maybe it's a long-term, long-burning commentator's curse, and if that's the case, I apologise for suggesting that somebody would die, because in the end, many, many engines have died. But a couple of drivers setting up their seasons, round 3, a couple of drivers maybe having their seasons knocked off the table at round 3. Plenty of drivers with repairs of some sort to take back. A couple of drivers with penalties that either accrued during the race or are going to accrue after the race. It was pretty clean, but there was a couple of scraps that we caught here and there. And yeah, we've got 3 weeks until the circus comes back around to Winton.
Yep. You are 100% right. Winton in 3 weeks' time, and we will see what the field happens to be after that one. So, well, it'll be an interesting point too, because I know that there's a couple of drivers that are probably going to miss Winton, so for them, that's going to be their drop round. Ironically, we were talking to Will Devenish just a few moments ago. He says he has no strong feelings either way. From what I understood, he was actually going to be missing that round. That was going to be the one for him that might have been the drop round, in the same way that Brenton Foley missed tonight's round, and that was probably going to be his drop round as well. Well, for the moment, everybody, we will leave it at that. It's been quite a long night. Thank you very much for staying with us all throughout the evening, wherever you happen to be tuning in from. And as always, please drive safely. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.